Wait a
Go
minute.
to properties.
Oh.
Property like what?
Your computer. Or like go to your sound festival.
Yeah, you choose. Yeah, choose.
Set it to second.
There you go.
Yeah, lower it. Lower it? I don't want to test anybody. No, I mean, well, not really. It's hard to tell what. All right, everyone. Hello, hello. Good to see each and every one of you individually. Couple of reminders. This will be my second time doing my list of reminders. If you have a phone and it's on and it makes a loud ringy type noise, or if you're rocking an old school pager or something like that, please turn those off and silence them. Perhaps they're pre-silenced from our previous speaker, hopefully so. Number two, if you are a non-FIAN and are interested in the program, getting a tour, finding out more about it, talk to either Sarah or myself, and we'll be happy to tour you through or give you some information or whatever it is that you like. Their word on the street, that street right out there, Livingston specifically, is that I guess a bunch of people are going on afterwards, and that is at the lodge, correct? Correct? The cohort always used to pick, so lodge, okay. So people will be there having adult beverages, browsing, having fun, reminiscing, waiting in anticipation, whatever the case may be, eating probably something as well. So feel free to join after that. Any other housekeeping stuff that I'm missing? Is all that somebody should be told? Okay. Spring break is next week. Everyone be aware of that. I'm sure you'll all be entering t-shirt contests with biggest man on beach and whatever goes on for spring break these days. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick, who I think is going to introduce our first teams, and good luck, everybody.
So I'll keep this short. For those of you who are non-FIANs, this is kind of the heart and soul of the FIEA experience, is the capstone projects. We started with, I think it was almost 30 game design pitches in November, cut that down to 11. Then in the very end of November, we cut that down to the 5 that you're going to see today. And then the students started at the beginning of the semester in early January trying to make prototypes. We've made a little bit of a change from previous years in that we're trying to focus a lot more on gameplay. In previous years, the art has really been sort of carrying the gigantic, massive part of the load. And while that will still happen, we're trying to get gameplay to be addressed earlier in the process so that we can have more effective use of the production resources going forward. At the end of the day, these 5 games after they're done being pitched, the faculty goes off into MI6 and we arm wrestle for a while and decide which projects we're going to cut, just like industry. And I can tell you for the faculty that this is very much like industry, maybe a little bit easier, because when I was in the industry, I'd say 60% of every project I started never made the shelves. So get used to it, stuff gets cut. And part of the drinking tonight will probably be people crying in their beer. For those of you, if you end up with your project cut, if you have some preference for where you would like to land, you can communicate that to your track director. And we will try to accommodate that, although we will promise absolutely nothing. But we will try to accommodate your wishes as best we can. If anybody, actually, the project is not cut and for some reason they really desperately want to make a change, again, talk to your track director about that. Maybe we can work something out, we'll see. So with that, we're going to have each project gets a total of 25 minutes. So we're starting a little late, so I'll give you a little bit of extra time. In that 25 minutes, they'll give their presentation. The goal is to sell the game design and also sell the team, to convince the faculty that this is a game worth doing and that this team is capable of carrying it off and giving us something that looks good at the end of July. So they give their presentation, and then anybody in the audience, whether you're a FIAN, a faculty, a non-FIAN visitor, whatever, is allowed to raise their hand, and they will field questions. And then at the end of the 25 minutes, or whether the question's up or whatnot, we'll have a 5-minute break while the next team sets up, gets the equipment checks and everything, and we'll continue like that, rinse, repeat, until all 5 projects have been presented. So with that, I give you Daniel and Rotten Fruit.
Sweet. All right, well, thanks for coming, everybody. I am Daniel Harrison, as he said, and I get to talk to you about a game that I truly love, Rotten Fruit. So, what is this game? You jump into this guy as he jumps into other people. He is a parasitic worm, and his ability is to take over the minds of the people of this world to accomplish his goal. And his goal It's nothing short of world domination. So with the help of the wise and sagely worm overlord mastermind, you're going to navigate through this world, jumping between people, and using their unique abilities to accomplish your goals. And so that might seem kind of morbid, like burrowing into people's brains, but it's not as bad as it sounds, because all of the people in our world are actually fruits and vegetables anthropomorphized as people. So it's a little bit less intense. And a lot of people, when I tell them that is what we're going for, they don't really know what to picture. Is it all fruit? Is it all vegetable? Is it all person? So we prepared a visual for you. You could let in our visual. So, have some rocks. Oh, thanks. So, Brian has done what I could have never said in words. He's really epitomized the spirit of our game. The spirit of our game is not just to have interesting puzzles to get through, but to be ridiculously wacky and funny. Because we recognize how ridiculous a world full of fruit and vegetable people is, and we don't want to lose that, and we definitely want our players to be able to enjoy that as much as we do. So I hinted a little bit at what our core gameplay is. That's switching between people and using their abilities. And the second element to that core gameplay is the fact that you rot when you're in these people, or the people rot. The more you make your host exert themselves, the grosser they get. And so with that to kind of spur them on to jump to more and more people and to not trying to marathon the game with any one class, let's get to the classes, because what would this game be without interesting people to take over? But first, I want to give you a little visual of what that kind of rotting will look like. This kind of shows you that people will react to you a little bit strangely when you start getting all gross and zombie. So let's talk about some of those interesting people. We have our noble class, our broccoli nobleman, our cauliflower nobleman, and their ability, since they are in control of society, is to directly affect the people around them. So the broccoli nobleman can talk people up, encourage them with inspiring words, and they literally will grow temporarily in size and weight. And the the cauliflower noblewoman, in complete opposite contrast with her disapproving gaze, can put you in your place, make you feel small, and small is what you become temporarily, so you can use these abilities on others to affect your environment. We also have our fruity girls. These two are our controller classes, right? They both have abilities to bribe and seduce, respectively, to influence the movement and get other people to of others and get other people to do things for them. So I can, as the courtesan, seduce a guard maybe into walking over and doing something for me, so I can in some ways be in two places at once accomplishing a synced up puzzle. And these last three classes are the ones I want you to pay special attention to, because they're the ones we're going to be featuring the most in the demo that you're about to see. That being, let's start with our pair commoner. He's a commoner, he's a heavy lifter. His job is to work manually. So in the environment, that he picks things up and he puts things down. That's his specialty. And so his job is to move things around the environment, restructure the environment to better suit your needs. We have our orange chicken, ever zesty, small, fast, well-seasoned, and with the ability to flutter jump, so adding a puzzle platformer element to these scenarios. And we have last, but of course not least, our pineapple guard, brute strength, very low in brains, and he can smash things. That's his job. He's real good at it. So now we're going to jump over into our Unity demo. Adam, if you could come up here. A couple things to note as we switch into this. Expect an apple instead of a pear in our prototype. The commoners are apples, and that you'll see a lot of things that look superfluous because there are many, many solutions to the puzzles we're about to show you. We're going to show you 2 levels. Look at us. We're good. Such skill. So we unfortunately only have time to show you 1 solution for each puzzle, but that is it. Adam, take it away.
Those pineapple paladins are the only thing standing between you and the gates of the pesticide. You must get past them so we can begin the first phase of infestation. Oh, and one more thing. Don't forget to talk to people. You'll be surprised at the secrets that spill from the lips of these rotting fruits.
Cluck, 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 cluck.
I want to carry you away.
Someone stole all my food. What am I supposed to sell now?
We'd make great fruit salad together.
Chicken isn't the only thing those guards seem to be hungry for. Don't look at me like that. I'm more than just a piece of fruit.
Are you hungry? I'm pretty hungry. I sure could go for some deep-fried orange chicken.
Cluck, 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 cluck. Those guards keep staring at me and licking their lips. Juice man chicken for sale, freshly harvested.
Good work. Now that you're in the middle, you must stop the production of the pesticide. It's the only thing preventing us from launching our infestation.
They treat us like animals. But if it weren't for the stirring machines, any contaminants that get into the vats would ruin the whole batch.
Hey, stop right there. You know, the foreman collects the calls of workers who leave their posts.
If I have to fix those stirring machines one more time, I swear. It's like the slightest tap and they break.
Hey, stop right there.
So that was our Unity demo. It shows some of our mechanics where they are. There's more that we unfortunately didn't have time to show you, more of those abilities and more puzzle solutions. But I'm really proud of where we've come so far in our mechanics. I'm really excited for where we're going. We're going to slide away from mechanics for just a moment to talk about our art and how beautiful this game will look. So here's a quick snapshot of that, a showcase, if you will. So that gives you an idea of what we're looking forward to doing in full production. It's important to note that this wasn't just pre-art, though. This actually represented a technical challenge that our tech artists achieved quite well, and that is those rotting shaders. That wasn't a small task to get dynamic shaders to not only change the texture and the colors, but actually deform, his face with sync and things like that. And we've achieved that, and that's a goal that we wanted done by now, and we have. We've done that. So let's start talking about a little bit of an important part of our process, and that is playtesting. It's become increasingly important in these last few weeks. So we realized that, especially with a puzzle game, how do you know it's good, right? Well, you know it's good if people understand how to do them, can do them, and then enjoy doing those puzzles. So that's what we set out to find. And we found that at first, a lot of people didn't know. If you look in the pie chart in the upper left, shows that 38% of us on our first playtest, or 38% of the people we playtested with, people who we didn't know how to beat our puzzles, right? They'd never seen our game before, and so they just didn't understand it. We weren't teaching them well enough. And so without making any of the puzzles easier, we spent 1 week, and we focused on how do we teach the players what they need to know, and how do we teach them well and clearly without giving away the puzzles, and without making the game or the puzzles easier. We actually made them a little bit harder, and those same two levels that you saw, where they were not doing well, they started doing a lot better. Our completion rate jumped to only 7% who didn't complete it. And not only that, but they did it a lot faster. This is where how long they were taking. They were taking like 37 minutes. And 1 week later, that dropped to 21 minutes to beat both of those two puzzles from scratch and having never seen it before. So that was really encouraging for us that we could get better that quickly. But our data isn't just for proving that we're doing well. It's also for seeing where we aren't and where we need to improve and showing this is our goal and this is what we're going for. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show you here. So this is the amount of time it took different players to do that second level this last play test. So some of them took a little bit less time, some of them took a lot more time. But with the exception of this group, which I'll talk about in a minute, we're starting to get kind of like a nice bell curve where the average person is taking the average amount of time, and that 5 to 10 minute margin is what we want our average time to be on a whole puzzle area. Because after that much time, people start getting frustrated and bored of that area, but in that is our sweet spot. And so we're moving these people over, and we're thinking a lot about how to get these people to understand more quickly, because the common thread with the people who take longer is that they just didn't pick up on something we were trying to teach them, or they didn't see a cue. So how can we cue them better without giving things away? And so going forward, we're going to be play testing our puzzles a lot, so much play testing. And we have a lot of puzzles to play test on. And when I say we have a lot of puzzles, I mean like it's really easy to combine all of the elements and all of the people and the bits of environment. Unfortunately, I don't have time to talk to you about them all, but we have puzzles out the wazoo, and we plan on playtesting them, so we can pick out the best ones and have that in our final product so we have the strongest possible game. So let's talk about the future. Where are we going? And most immediately, we're moving into UDK. That is our production engine. That's the environment we always intended to move into after we were through mostly with prototyping. And since we are nearing the end of our of knowing which mechanics are the best, and which ones do players like the most. We're going to be moving all of our programmers are going to be moving all of our code and all of our mechanics into this UDK environment while the producers finish off the last of the playtesting of those core features, those core abilities, and playtest and make lots of puzzles and playtest and make puzzles and playtest, so that when we move in and we're all ready, we have a really strong base on which to iterate on the puzzles we're making, which is the biggest part of our game. Last but certainly not least, we have to talk about the risks, right? What hazards are we facing? And one of those risks is our scope. It's been talked to us a lot, brought up a lot, that our scope might be intense, or it might not work out. So we put a lot of thought into how do we know that our scope is right for the amount of people we currently have, because we can't depend on getting new people. So that's how we scoped ourselves. We scoped ourselves that we have the way our schedule is laid out and the speed at which we're proving out certain mechanics shows us that the amount of abilities that we showed you, and those abilities specifically, are right for our scope. And we can achieve this mechanically, and we can definitely achieve this artistically. So with that, I want to give a quick step away accolades to my team, who is amazing. They are willing to put in the hard late nights, and they're willing to put up with me, which is just miraculous. They're fantastic, and they've done so much work so quickly, and I'm really impressed with not only their willingness to work hard, but their willingness to pivot and drop things that just aren't working so that we can get to places that are better. And so thank you to my team for being so cool. So that's all I have for you today. Any questions? Yes, please.
So I think the worm concept art was beautiful, and the concept art that you worked on, just really great. And then the production, or the art showcase that you showed there, presumably that was in UDK.
Yes, it was.
Again, really nice stuff. What I'm not so clear on is, this looks like the same game that I saw in the pitch in November. So I'm wondering what the producers, aside from the sketches that you showed, which were plentiful, and you said you had lots of puzzle ideas in mind, and you were intending to do lots of play testing to see which ones are fun. Did you prototype more than what we just saw today, or?
Yes, we did. So almost all of those abilities are not only prototyped, they're reinforced that people get them and enjoy doing them. The two abilities that are not in are the nobles abilities, those shrinking and drawing people. So those are the ones that are not tested before people. But with the exception of those two abilities, all of those abilities are in and integrated into some puzzle somewhere, and we've tested that. If you remember, if you think back to the original demo really didn't have any abilities besides the guard's ability to kill people. It was all talking, host switching, and getting people to follow you around. So we really didn't have abilities for any given class. Those are all entirely new from our original demo. Does that answer your question?
It sort of.
Okay.
How many puzzles are you planning to produce?
So our scope for the amount of time that we want the player to play is about 20 minutes, which means 2 solid puzzle environments. That said, we are always thinking about how to layer in multiple solutions to the same puzzle area. So for instance, in the town square, there's several ways of getting past those guards, and they're all different mechanically for how you want to achieve that. And we're doing that partially because we want a dense play experience with lots of options for the player, and partially because we don't have the asset time, we don't have the artist time to make 10 environments for 10 puzzles, but if we can put 10 puzzles in 2 environments, 5 each. So that kind of scope. So maybe 3 to 5 puzzles and puzzle solutions to get to your goal in 2 different areas. That is what we're aiming for.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Since you weren't able to show them all, can you describe all of the abilities that character had that you used?
Which character specifically?
The one that you demoed.
Oh, which puzzles are in that demo?
There was obviously you were doing like a stair mechanic or something. Are those released shown? Can you just describe all of them that you have? You obviously have the ability to switch bodies. What else?
Yes. Okay. So there's the 7 base abilities for each player type that I described, and then there's the ability to switch. And so all of them are really just like ways of combining those in ways that you have to really think about in the game. So for instance, one of the puzzles that I really like involves you have to, there's like imagine a shipping yard. There are like scales for weighing goods that are coming in and out. So there's a guard or just kind of standing on one of them, minding his own business, and you need to get up to something that if you could only stand on that other side, and the chicken can't jump that high, then you could get to. So you walk up and you berate him with the cauliflower noblewoman. He shrinks down, and the other side already has a crate on it, so it switches. You stand on it, and you wait for that to revert, and you go up. It's like, for instance, with just one ability, we have that kind of puzzle. But then you can chain that into, well, now you have to go on to that second level, get someone else, and bring them back down. And so you're kind of bringing in these two environments and integrating them with each other. So people are, it's really the puzzle is, how do I get into the right people to get to my goal? Because my goal might be 3 steps away. So I can think, oh, there's my goal. How do I get there? Oh, I can get halfway there if I go with this person. And then once I'm there, I can figure out the next half. Does that kind of answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Any other one up here?
Yeah, I noticed, first off, have you played Stacked or Messiah? Because
Yes.
your game reminds me of
Yes.
both of those. All right. Then my second question is, why are you measuring time as the variable for enjoyment? I mean, you have 35 minutes. I mean, how many months you put, and you have like 35 minutes of gameplay? Like, from that perspective, if I was, producing that game, you'd have to throw lots and lots of money just to even get a 2-hour scope gameplay. And yes, admittedly, on the left corner, it did say did not complete, but that cues more of an interface kind of a problem and graphical problem rather than, oh, I need to get this done as soon as possible, because speedrun games generally succeed because of their competitive nature. So I guess my question is, why are you trying, based on those stuff, why are you trying to focus on making this game completed as soon as possible within that period of time?
I think probably I didn't convey that correctly. So for one, to address your earlier comment, we're not measuring enjoyment by speed. We're measuring enjoyment by, literally, so our playtest setup is we record the screen, the game's audio, we record the player's face and what they're saying, and we have them talk about the game while they're playing it. So we're recording for enjoyment, literally how many aha moments do they have, how often do they laugh, or how long does it take them, how often are they stuck?
But I'm just trying to say is, that's only 35, that's like 30,
Right.
30 minutes of content, and I don't know, I just feel like that's not the right questions to be asking in this genre, especially since Telltale Games, those games are done in 2-hour little intervals, but they charge $20 and you have an entire series of $50 for Walking Dead and so on and so forth. So I guess that's all I have to say in that sense.
Okay, so I'm a little bit unsure of your question, but it seems like it is, why are we focusing on such a short play experience?
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is, I mean, it's the short play experience, but you also don't have the production resources to even elongate it in such a way, especially if they're not completing the game. I mean, that cues to me, that they're not understanding the interface in that sense, rather than there isn't enough content or the content is too long.
Right, and that is the problem we address, and you are correct that our original problem was partially interface.
Yeah.
It's important to note that Capstone games are not intended necessarily to be full production AAA titles. Right, they're intended to be really great showcases of the work we can do. And so our aim is not to make a 3-hour game. Our aim is to make the best 20-minute game we can.
Right.
That will leave the person who's playing it going, oh, I want more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody, I think I saw one over here earlier. Still a question? Cool. Any other questions from the room? Yes.
So in your little showcase, that was done in UDK.
Yes, sir.
It looked like there was some kind of performance problems going on. The frame rate looked pretty choppy to me, but there wasn't that much in the scene. I mean, do you know what the frame rate is? Are you aware of what might be causing performance issues?
I do not have that issue. I know that, and this is obviously not the full answer and something we'll look into, but part of the issue is Camtasia can do frame rate hits, and that's what we used.
Oh, that was a Camtasia?
That was a Camtasia. That was not live.
Okay.
Okay.
That
So that's part of
It
it.
was mainly me just trying to go slowly. and not rush.
Well,
through
it was hitchy frame rate, but if it was Camtasia, then
Yeah.
that's the answer. I didn't know whether that
I
was
think
live
that's a
or-
large part of it, but obviously that we're looking for making sure that it's not so full of polys or something like that that it's going to make gameplay unplayable.
And you're in Unity prototyping now?
Yes, that's where we've been.
And your ultimate production engine is going to be UDK.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell me a little bit about the process of porting over? Is it going to be a direct port? You're going to rewrite the code completely? I mean, how's it going to go, and kind of how much time are you kind of expecting that to take?
Okay. I'm expecting all of our core mechanics to take about a month to be put into UDK. Now, that's not saying a month polished, right? That's saying a month, and they're all in there, and that's our new sandbox for building puzzles and iterating on them. Yeah. So in the meantime, until those are ready for the producers to be building puzzles, and obviously this is somewhat of a gradient, we are going to be continuing with the Unity prototype because all of our mechanics are already there. So we might as well at least keep using that and not waste time in making our puzzles and improving those out. Does that kind of answer your question? Excellent. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
Can I ask why you're making the engine switch to begin with?
Yes, there's actually a very, very key reason why we're doing this. The rotting mechanic is a mechanic that we really like for keeping the gameplay moving along and providing a little extra layer of difficulty and motivation to keep host switching. And the rotting mechanic looks really choppy if done by just switching out the textures, and you can't do any deformations in that way. UDK provided us a more convenient way and a well-supported way to write those custom shaders for deformations as well as gradual change in color that really looks like rotting instead of looks like I just changed the overlay. Given that a lot of our engines all kind of do the same things mechanically, right? You can make most mechanics work in any engine, and that UDK didn't provide any barriers there mechanically. We went with UDK because it supported a good feedback system for that specific mechanic, which is our namesake.
This might, and I apologize.
No, hit me. Go ahead.
It being pointed, but
Hit me.
if the rotting mechanic is, so you already kind of scoped out your moment-to-moment gameplay in your Unity, and you've got all your mechanics there. Is there an idea that you have that you could use your team for a month on to make the game even more fun than spending that time porting? Like, is rotting going to be the thing that's going to make the game more fun than it's worth that month, or do you have other ideas that would say, you know, we can continue with Unity and make it even better because we don't have to spend this time? Is rotting it? Is rotting the feature that's going to make me want to buy your game? Is it worth the month?
Is it worth the month? It's a fair question. One important thing to note is that Unity has some issues with it in specific things that we like to do that will just be easier to iterate on in UDK. One of those being the way we're doing AI and the way we're doing how people move around and react. After having looked into it, and we spent over kind of the winter break before we all started on this project, we spent about 3 weeks really diving into how difficult are the specific things that we know we need are in all of the engines that were the most viable for us at first blush. And there are a lot of little things that that found out that kind of pointed at either CryEngine or UDK, and in the end, CryEngine was just not a good fit as far as how fast we can do things in, and UDK would have been faster to iterate on. So we're actually not losing a lot of time because in the end, the mechanics, a lot of the mechanics that we have will work more smoothly in UDK. Thank you for your question. I enjoy the hard questions. It's good. Do we have any more? Really hit me. Come on. Go ahead.
So aside from
last
moving
question.
over things that you already know you need,
Yes.
what is there programming-wise that is hard to do?
Good question. AI is always tricky, and making AI not just like work, yes, they can Pathfind, make it A-star, but making it look like this is how people move, this is how people act. So that's one big thing. And I imagine that we're going to have to mess with the visual editor in UDK some. And so writing tools and things like that would be another program with that.
Okay, I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but without a license to UDK, you don't have source access to the editor. So tools, changes like that are not actually possible with without like 100K.
Okay, well then we'll have to look into that. But definitely what's already there can be sufficient for us. And if we can't make tools in the engine, we can make tools out of the engine if it helps us. And so we'll do what we need to do to make this game good. Cool, and that was my last question, so thank you all very much.
5-minute break. If you're here later than 2:15, please. got a little network problem, but we're going to make do. So I give you Will and Neon Knight Riders.
My name is Will Thompson. I'm the project lead of Neon Knight Riders. This game is going to be a little different in that it's a network game, so I'm going to go right into it. We are Neon Knight Riders, and this is our green light update. So, welcome to Ronin City. 60 million people live here, and only a few get to feel alive. Those few are the Neon Knight Riders, gangs that run wild on the streets of Ronin City, looking for something the city has lost. Ronin City is our love song to the cyberpunk classics of the 80s. Classics like Blade Runner and Neuromancer. It's a city taken to a city's extremes, a place where every neon light blazes with garish and desperate life. What is NNR? First of all, NNR is going to be built in Unity Pro. The demo that you'll see today is 2v2v2 team multiplayer with a compelling territory control element and high-speed movement. The key mechanics of the game are encirclement. As you can see, we have two teams here, pink team and blue team. If pink team takes this territory and that territory, they gain all the ones inside. When you close the circuit, you complete the gap and get everything inside. This is one of our very early design documents because this is the core mechanic of our game. And you can see that we try to keep everything in the design as simple and self-explanatory as possible. So to that end, we're going to show you a gameplay demo right now. Andrew's going to drive because he's way better at this game than I am. Fact that is unfortunate since I'm supposed to be a driver. Andrew is our technical producer and built most of these prototype systems, so he wrote the character controller, so he's the best at using it. I'm expecting you to win, Andrew.
Hopefully. 5 minutes, right?
Yep, 5 minutes, 70%. So you can see in our prototypes server menu that we've got a ton of different options that we can toggle so that we can iterate extremely quickly on gameplay mechanics, map layout, rule sets. You can see that we've got our 6 players in now, right?
Yep, 6 out of 9 says.
So we're going to be showing you our main demo map. We've tried on all these other maps and we like this one the best. So you and Dan are pink, right?
Yep.
All right.
We've got yellow and teal in another room.
Okay, yeah. So the other 2 teams are in the cohort 9 space over there.
That's good.
So, Andrew, right now, you can see on the mini-map here, this is Andrew. He's climbing to the top of what we call a keystone building that has a special power at the top of it. This one will take this entire block if Andrew can hold this area for a certain amount of time. The keystones are a central point of our game design because it allows us to have module additional powers that we can add into maps and iterate on different features very quickly. You can see Andrew is going to try to cut off this yellow player here and prevent him from encircling the city block. When the buildings are flashing, that means they're on cooldown so that you cannot chase behind somebody and just take buildings as they're taking them. You have to try and tactically cut them off. Wow. Blue and yellow are really taking over in that southern part of the city there. You can see yellow just got this entire encirclement. Okay, Andrew just got hit by a barrier. Somebody threw a projectile at him and it froze his movements as a defensive measure so that they could get in front of him and start encircling buildings that he was aiming for. Uh-oh, it's a 3-way race to the top of this keystone right now. Andrew, you gonna make it?
Oh no.
Oh no! Oh, yellow got the keystone. We just took this whole block. Oh, yellow is Yellow's crushing pretty hard right now. Oh, come on. See, Yellow is not tagging these buildings behind Andrew because they're on cooldown. They're going to have to get in front of them if they want to stop him from circling it. Oh, wow. Everybody is fighting over this one block. Oh, yeah. Pink's taking advantage of the confusion. If you notice on the end of the street there, we have our mini-maps actually on billboards in World. We've left the central mini-map up for the ease of the audience, but we've been playtesting with these the mini-maps here, so that you have to actually get up and do some recon to see what's going on in the city. Oh man. Nice. Just gotta hold it. Boom. So Pink's Keystone building went off and took that entire block before Yellow could circle. Oh, it's a little closer now. Pink and Yellow are neck and neck. Teal is kind of getting crushed. You can see that Andrew just dropped a plane barrier behind himself that the person following him ran into because they weren't able to dodge in time. Nailed by the car again. I shouldn't have talked you up so much, Andrew. Oh, nice. Oh, wow, still neck and neck. Yeah, Yellow's staying ahead a little bit.
Gotta get that Keystone.
So you see that Pink is deciding to encircle a smaller block here rather than go for the full thing because they're not sure that they can get to all of it in time. There's a lot of tactical decision making that has to go on about how much space you think you can carve out before somebody comes along to interrupt you. Oh, a minute to play, gentlemen.
We put quickly, Dan.
Oh, Pink's in front now. Oh, the Teal actually has come back.
Nice.
Oh, they just got the
Dan's trying to get to the AoE in time. 20 seconds to go. Oh, nailed by the car again. The drivers in Ronin City are really bad. It's really a tragedy. There ought to be a law. Oh, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. He wins. Thank you, Andrew.
I would definitely have lost.
So, that's the state of the game right now. So the next question is how we got here. Our design process has been focused on iteration speed and flexibility. You saw one of our very early design documents before. We tried it with every proposed feature, decide what its strengths and weaknesses are, talk over them as a team, and then features that we decide should go forward, we feed into our prototype, play test them, and then either accept or reject them. And you can see this process has been going on for quite a while now. We've made a lot of changes to the game, but I think we've finally drilled down on what is the core mechanic of the game. Features, features, lovely features, more features. Okay. The key here has been, like I said, iteration speed and playtesting. I've been very proud of Carl and his design work on this. The team has really been cooperating together. The foundations of the city. That city was built not by hand, but with a tool. We decided from the very beginning to, again, build for iteration and flexibility. So rather than hand placing buildings in the city, nice work, guys. Sorry you couldn't come out on top of camera.
That's right.
That's the rest of my team filing in sad defeat. We decided to build our systems for iteration and flexibility. So We've built a tool that generates all of the logic necessary for the encirclement mechanic automatically from a bitmap. Despite the fact that the city operates on a grid shape, you can build complex shapes and have interesting building structures that conform to the grid. And we're just scratching the surface of what we can really do with this tool. Post Greenlight, we're looking to add a lot of functionality to it. So just as an example, this is the bitmap for the map that you just saw us play. So all that we have to do is load that bitmap into our tool in Unity. You can see it there. And then you just hit Update key, and then you hit Generate Map. And it lays everything out. It takes prefabs in and corresponds them to the shades on the bitmap and builds the map in a matter of minutes, where it would take our level designer, Kevin, even though he's extremely talented, hours to do the same. This has allowed us to iterate on map design extremely quickly. And honestly, it helps us to think of more game modes that we might be going forward in the future as we get more resources. So the art of Ronin City. Like I was saying, just because the city is on a grid doesn't mean that the buildings all have to be square, like you saw in our lovely Unity demo with our producer art. These are some of the building concepts that our art team has pulled out. So you can see that there's a very sort of gray and monolithic, oppressive look to the buildings. And what the Night Riders are trying to do is scar that with some life and bring some very strong, highlighted lines of light, trim lights, floodlights, neon signs. These are the things that you'll be tagging and changing colors in the full version of the game. Character-wise, we're again going for this sense of dynamism. You can see that our character here has a very disdainful look on her face that I think turned out really well. She's also holding the hoverboard in one of the two ways that we're concepting. Hers folds up and fits in a holster, whereas this saucy lady's goes on her back. We've gotten some really, really interesting character concepts going. I think we're all really excited to move forward with these. So Ronin City, as I said, using the tool, I think we can generate really interesting maps of the size that we need for the high-speed gameplay we have in a very short amount of time. Moving forward, we're going to be going into a clean Unity project. Because we've been iterating so quickly, the project is very prototypey right now, and we're going to clean that up and get a solid foundation to build on in the future. We're going to keep building our design foundation. The core mechanics are settled, and we're happy with them, but the keystone buildings are very modular. We can have all kinds of powers that we have ideas for to go in those that we're excited to start trying out. So we're going to expand on our foundation. We're going to be enhancing Unity's lighting, which I know that our programming team is very excited about, because light is super important to our game, and we think that we can do better than the Unity Pro defaults that we have available to us as a fallback. We're going to be expanding the map tool so that we can build more interesting city layouts more and more quickly, starting to attempt to procedurally do things like roads, street posts, all that kind of detail pass. We're going to be improving networking. Right now, again, we have very prototypey networking systems. We're going to be moving towards an authoritative server model to stabilize things and allow us to have larger and larger players. And we're going to be transitioning from a prototyping mindset into a production mindset, getting more stringent schedules and starting to build this out at full quality. So that's our Greenlight update. Any questions? Yes, Nick.
All right. So I got a few questions for the tool building tool that you guys have. So how easy is it to change out like those shapes that you guys have for artist-driven buildings, like what they're going to build?
Extremely easy. All you have to provide to the tool is prefabs in Unity, and you assign those prefabs to a shade on the bitmap. And so we have all of the shades available to us for different prefabs, and then anywhere on the bitmap it sees that shade, it fills that prefab into that grid.
Okay. How are you controlling height?
Dan, do you want to talk about it?
Well, so right now there's just a single prefab that occupies one spot on the grid per pixel, and you just assign that. So that was a three-tone image. There's two shades of gray and a black. Moving forward, what we'd like to do is introduce a height map that you have that corresponds to the city, and then that dictates the height of each individual building. So there's variation, but it's not entirely random, because that would just be strange for gameplay. And also, right now, like he said, you don't have to have a full rectangular building. They could easily be some amorphous shape
that simply occupies 2 spots on the grid. And then reading, as the tool reads them in, it knows that it's a 2-pixel wide building, and it pulls in the left and the right half, sticks them together, and then when you see it in the game, it's just one contiguous.
So this is really good right now for a grid structure. Have you guys thought about how you're going to do more interesting patterns that isn't just purely a grid?
You should see some of the city shapes we've experimented with. You
Yeah.
can, in sort of a Minecraft fashion, you can create really interesting shapes even with the square pixel grid setup. We had some circular cities for a while there. We had a set that was like a tangram set of triangles that fit in together. You can do some really interesting shapes.
So how did that change gameplay at that point when you're using these other shapes other than this grid kind of fashion?
It makes the minimap and recon very important because you don't have those clear lines of sight down long straight streets. So that's a very interesting effect that it has. And it emphasizes the rooftop movement more than the bike movement because, again, you don't have those long straightaways that you can really cover a ton of ground on with the, sorry, I call the bike the hoverboard. Sorry, Dan. Dan loves the hoverboard so much. So yeah, that's what we found in playtesting those complex shapes, is that it really, taking away the straights really changed the balance.
Just one last thing.
Yeah.
So for your presentation, I know why you guys showed the mini-map the entire time.
Right.
Now you guys have said you are experimenting with putting those on billboards and things.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw them in the game,
Yeah.
but they're on rendered text.
So how's that working out currently? Like, as you guys play a game, are you guys currently trying to force yourselves to only use the billboard system, or are you using a combination of the two?
We're certainly, we've been moving in that direction lately. Again, we decided that for clarity, we wanted the minimap and the demos today. Early, when our movement mechanics were not as far along as the encirclement, we had a problem where we found we were staring at the minimap a lot. And so we did several one-page designs to solve that problem. And the billboards, actually, Tommy, where are you? Tommy suggested the billboards, and they've been working out very well.
Very cool.
Yes, Paul.
So there seems to be 2 aspects of the mechanic here. The one is that you mentioned moving very fast on the board, and then the other is kind of a parkour-ish sort of thing. And I'm sure that was what we were looking at. There was prototype jumping very, very
Right, exactly,
tall. So
yeah.
I'm guessing instead you're climbing and leaping and whatnot. Are you planning on doing additional stuff with the parkour aspect?
We are certainly not expecting to do anything Assassin's Creed-ish or anything like that with
Okay.
the parkour. That's way out of scope for us. Certainly, it will not be the Kevin Peterson animation that you saw in today,
Yeah.
but we're not aiming for a very complex like IK rig or anything animation for the parkour.
So, you know, the idea that, I like the idea that you had these high value targets, right?
Right, the
On,
keystone
that you have to parkour to get to, or
Right.
that climb to get to.
Right.
But then it seems like you have to get down, you know, in order to go fast again.
You do.
Are you talking about doing anything in the air where you're kind of, for lack of a better word, ziplining or Spider-Manning through the sky?
We do actually have sort of catapults on the rooftops right now that you can use to cross the city extremely quickly. The other aerial skill that we have in right now is what we're calling fast fall, where when you do jump off in that keystone, you can tap jump and you will just plummet straight to the ground so you can get going again as quickly as possible.
You know, the other thing you said, and again, this is mechanic related, is that you had to hold a building.
Mhm.
How do you hold, so once you capture one of those key spots, how is it that you're holding it?
You have to prevent anyone else from getting in the beam of light on the top of it and tagging it. For,
Okay, so-
I think it's 15 seconds right now.
We actually lowered it down to 8.
8?
15 was a bit too long.
Can you do that with the combination of
The barriers,
the
exactly.
barriers that you have? And those barriers, I'm guessing you can't spam. They're
Right, they're a limited resource, exactly. Yep. Yep. Todd?
Have you read Snow Crash by Neil
I
Stewart?
have definitely read
Okay.
Snow Crash.
The minute that game started up, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm right there. That's chapter
Hero
one.
protagonist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what's up?
It's going to come out half as a question, half as a comment. But
Okay.
Your game has these really, so you've got a player education issue. And
We
you're
do,
trying
yeah.
to solve it with the billboards, and you solved it for us with your mini map. But you've got your solution in front of you in that you've got these amazing vistas.
Right.
When you get up high,
It
the
is,
game
yeah.
is really cool looking, and you mechanically actively discourage players from getting up high except for those little high value targets, right? Because what you're doing is if I drive by a little block, I'm taking that block. I don't actually have to stand on it. So I think, what are you going to do to encourage, one, people to exploit height? Because it
Right.
looks like it's important to your game, but it's not actually important to your game right now.
Right, exactly. So in a full-scale map, we'll have more than just the 2 corner keystones. They'll be, more deliberately scattered through the map. So to encourage that. And B, I don't know if Andrew did it during the playtest, but it actually can be beneficial to try and encircle buildings by running along their rooftops because it's a sort of stealth aspect to the game. People don't see you on the street and try to hit you with the barriers. And so there's that two-level gameplay we found has been very good. But verticality, encouraging verticality is definitely one of our design considerations moving forward.
My piece of advice,
Mhm.
and maybe you've prototyped it, and I don't know, but I would totally disable being able to take any of those buildings when you're on the street. I would make the street just a way to get from point A to point B really fast and then get people moving up. Because then you won't need those billboards. Those billboards are only useful right now because you're on the street.
Right.
And you're spending a lot of time down there and set it up where you can see how the world is playing out.
It's definitely something we can consider in prototype.
The other question that I had was you presented a 2 versus 2 multiplayer game, and it looks like you've got these places where you could have really cool cooperative moments, but it also looks like you're not actively encouraging cooperation.
Right.
How are you going to approach making it a co-op game?
Right now, the most effective use of cooperation is when you're trying to encircle a block to coordinate with each other and sort of each do a corner of it, because then you can do it twice as quickly. That's the cooperation that we've mainly seen in gameplay so far. We've talked about things like a keystone building whose power is that it gives you a speed boost as long as you're within a certain distance of a teammate, and things like that where you have to coordinate your movement to cross terrain quickly and then split up and capture things and come back. So yeah, that's another feature that we've been talking about mechanics to solve.
So your cooperation mechanic will be based primarily off communication and not necessarily off mechanic. It's more like
It's like teamwork, right? Rather than
so
being
it's
rooted
like
in the mechanics.
essentially being in a basketball game and saying, hey, go over there, as opposed to having the game kind of push you towards cooperative mechanics.
Right, that's definitely the state of the game right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Makes sense.
Thanks. Yep.
So you've got this cool grid like generating your buildings and stuff, but what about the terrain? Like what about like highways? You showed those pictures of like highways going over buildings and stuff like that. Is that something you're going to place in the scene afterward? How are you going to do things like rivers if you wanted to do those or
right.
any other cool stuff?
So ideally, and Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, ideally we'd like to integrate the highway systems into the tool by providing it basically with a modular kit of road pieces that can fit together based on the shapes of the roads that are drawn in the bitmap. But that is a non-trivial problem. And so, I mean, feel free.
So it's, as long as the roads conform to a grid and you have a T in each cardinal direction or just a simple 4-way crossroad or a horizontal, vertical set of 2, those problems can all be solved trivially. But the problem is when you, A, try to introduce a height map to the terrain itself, getting some way to have, I need to find out how Rockstar does it, but how you get a sidewalk, a raised portion of the terrain that conforms to a height map. I would love to do that. Everything else about what we have going on right now works with that. So that's consideration number 1, risk thing to overcome. And the other, along that vein, the other thing is getting a highway that is not conforming to the grid, that doesn't have to be hand placed. And so both of those potentially won't be overcome, but the game is still there without it, and the levels can still be made with a hand-placed circuit of highways. So worst case, it'll still work.
That's one of the key things that Unity does for us is that because the tool is actually in the editor itself, anything the tool can't do, we can still do hand placing in the editor.
I think I heard that Houdini, there's going to be some kind of hookup between Houdini and Unity, and I wonder if there's something there with what you're trying to build, because Houdini is really good at producing procedural generated worlds and things like that, right? So just something you might want to look into if this project makes it through.
Definitely, thanks. I think I can do one more question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's obviously the whole point of the game is to keep it very fast paced, keep you moving as much as possible.
Right.
But I noticed that when you go up to get those high value, the keystones or whatever they're called, you have to then stop for 8 seconds as a best defense mechanic. And it's like very counterintuitive to what the rest of the game promotes. Like there's something that you plan to do, like have you do while you're up there, because just standing around kind of like just stops the whole atmosphere.
Exactly. One of the things that we're considering for that is that as you fight each other on the rooftops, it becomes who can get back up to the rooftop more quickly. So that brings the movement mechanics as the not parkour, but as the climbing mechanics get more satisfying to play. That will add the movement back into the defense of the city tops. And of course, not every keystone will have that same time limit defense that you have to do for it. It's just the tag bomb that has that in right now. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
We all take our seats. All right, let's hear it for Focal Length.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Tim Venzel, and I'm here to present to you Focal Length for the faculty's consideration for continued development. Now, Focal Length has evolved extensively since the beginning. However, the core premise has remained the same, which is that this is a different kind of first-person shooter. We place the players in the shoes of a news cameraman in the beginning of an alien invasion. And instead of asking the player to shoot aliens with a rifle or rocket launcher, we ask players to shoot aliens with a video camera and capture them with film. Now, the core player goal and the overarching goal is for the player to satisfy the folks at home and satisfy their news network producer. And they do this by reading their viewer meter that operates foundationally the same as the viewer or the crowd feedback in Guitar Hero and Rock Band in those systems. So there are two death conditions in Focal Length. One, for dying in the environment and getting yourself killed by an alien. And two, not filming compelling enough footage or not shooting footage at all to the point that you lose all of your viewers and it no longer warrants you being on the air and your news network producer cuts you. So the game's structure. We initially started out with a linear design with an experience more akin to Uncharted or The Last of Us, with set-piece moments that are highly scripted. We diverted away from that direction, and we're taking a non-linear approach. We feel that for our gameplay pillars, which I'll go into, the player experience was best served with a non-linear open environment that the player has the freedom to explore at their leisure and will. So the core pillars of our gameplay. The core pillars of our gameplay are what we want the player to experience at the high level. And the way we aim to do this primarily is through our objectives and the way the objectives are accomplished. We want to challenge the players creatively, tactically, and strategically, and mechanically. So an example of a creative challenge, a high level of a creative challenge, would be to challenge the player to take a still photograph of the most heart-wrenching scene they can find in the next minute. This takes the player from having a simple glorified fetch quest of go here and look at this and film it, to demanding that the player engage thoughtfully with our medium and actually evaluate the environment themselves. Tactical and strategic challenges. The player will have to navigate throughout a very dangerous environment and often have to lure and manipulate the environment. So in the event that the player needs to capture an alien getting killed, however, an alien is around a corner and needs to be moved, the player will need to place themselves at risk to run away from the alien and lure the alien into the line of fire. So that's an example of a strategic challenge. Additional moment-to-moment interaction. A non-lethal challenge and hazard that the player will have to deal with is the presence of fleeing civilians that will knock the player out of their filming in the event that the player collides with them. Now for mechanical challenges, before I actually list mechanical challenges, I'll lay out specifically what the mechanics of our game are and how they function. So the core of our game mechanics for the movement is going to be very familiar to those of you who have played Call of Duty or Halo. In this case, we have a walk, we have a sprint, and a vault, and overall interaction with the environment, and a crouch. Now, the bread and butter of the experience is our camera functionality. It's how the player uses the camera to successfully gain viewers as optimally as possible. And the way they do this is by operating the zoom and focus of the camera independently, but in tandem with one another. And we wanted to make this a challenge for the player, yet remain accessible for the average gamer. Now, capturing subjects. I'm going to use the word, or the term subjects a lot in this presentation. And when I say subjects, what I mean are things in the environment that are capable of earning the player points. And in our game, points are the same as viewers. So if you are gaining points from a subject, you are gaining viewers that adds to your viewership ratings and keeps your bar up for that tug-of-war mentality. The brackets indicate how many points have been gained from a subject for the shape of the brackets. So a good way to understand subjects is to picture a sponge full of water, the sponge being the subject and the water being the points that you are earning from that subject. As you are capturing a subject, you are essentially wringing points out of that subject. And the shape of the brackets will indicate this to the player. The brackets, we wanted to incorporate elements that actually come from cameras and film, and part of that is facial recognition technology. And so for this, we've incorporated that with the brackets. So as you gain points, the brackets close until they finally connect, at which point they burst out of existence, indicating that you have captured all available points. In addition to the shape and connectivity of the brackets, the color of the brackets indicates your quality of film. And your quality of film indicates how quickly and how rapidly you gain points from a subject. So in the event that you film a subject that is both blurry and out of focus, that subject's going to be surrounded by red brackets, and that's going to indicate to the player that they need to improve their shot by either zooming and having it comfortably occupy the shot, or zooming in and out to the appropriate extent that it is a clear image. On the opposite end of the scale, green brackets indicates that you are capturing a subject as quickly as possible because it is in optimal focus and in optimal zoom. Now, I'm going to give you an example using the classic scene from Jurassic Park, where they first encounter the first dinosaur, of what these brackets actually look like and what this dynamic looks like. So in this particular shot, the player has this dinosaur way too zoomed in, and it's completely out of focus. And thus, the brackets are red and are moving together very slowly. So this is a very inefficient means of capturing the points from this subject. However, in this shot, the shot has improved. It's better. It's still not great, but it's a little more in focus and it more comfortably occupies the shot. But because it's moving faster and it's capturing subjects at a faster rate, it manages to get all the points of time. Now with the green brackets, with the subject perfectly in focus and perfectly occupying the shot, that process is very fast. And in our game, we are able to have a bank of how many points are within each subject and the rate at which it's captured. So our development team has the ability to finely tune the rate that each subject will have. So we will prevent the idea of the player being able to just stare at a subject for 30 seconds in red and just win the game that way. Why is this important? Why would you want to be able to capture a subject faster? Well, to go into one of our mechanical challenges, if you need to capture a subject fast because it's going to get away, such as an alien drone escaping or an alien that is elusive and runs very quickly, you need to be able to score the optimal points by having it both in perfect clarity and in perfect zoom to get it in time before it escapes forever. Now, our bonus system is the most dramatic change and addition we've made to the game that has really deepened the player's strategy and really the player's style. It promotes the way the player wants to play the game. These are our 4 bonuses. I'll explain each one. Our directive bonus. If you are walking through the environment and your news network producer who's talking to you all the time says, hey, turn that way, I want you to get a picture of that burning car. And you take a picture of that burning car and get footage of that. You will get a directive bonus from that. However, let's say you don't want to follow orders and you want to film what you want to film. And there's a dying woman off in the distance that you see that you would rather film. You can go film that instead. And in this particular case, it would be a drama bonus because that dying woman has a dramatic value. Additionally, risk is exactly how it sounds. If you place yourself in a high-risk situation and you film the encounter and you film the subjects, you'll get risk bonuses. Now, intelligence is a bonus that the player gets for capturing footage that has value for the human resistance against the aliens. So if you happen to film the weak spot of an alien that's being exploited by humans and it's defeated, that would be a very lucrative intelligence bonus. Now, to understand and get a picture of really the player choices that get involved with this system, I'll paint a picture in your mind of a scenario. You're in a street, and coming down the street are 3 foot soldier aliens, and they're killing anything in their path. In the street, there's a dumpster, and behind this dumpster is a woman and her child cowering, trying to hide. Your network producer gives you the directive to film these 2 people get killed because it's going to be very dramatic. What do you do in this case? Do you do kind of the scummy thing and get both the directive and drama bonus because perhaps you need those points very quickly? Or do you play the hero and play the risk factor to lure the alien away from the woman and child? The player in this case gets to choose how they play the game. Now, before we go into our demonstration, I want to briefly cover one of the non-lethal hazards that we have, which is colliding with fleeing civilians. And this will knock you out of your camera and your zoom and focus. And you can see in this picture that the player almost captures the tank, but they were not aware or did not properly position their body to where they would be able to complete the capture before being knocked out of focus. So at this point, let's go ahead and do our demonstration.
All right, kid. Counting on you. You want that job, you better earn it. Go give me that footage, rookie. Jesus, they got tanks down there now? Hey, give me some footage of that. What is that? Whoa, pan up, pan up, pan up! Okay, now zoom in to get some more detail. Okay, now adjust the focus to get some more clarity. Good. Heartbreaking.
If JP had managed his zooming and focus a little bit, he would have been able to capture that. So it shows the challenging nature of actually
throwing JP under the bus.
Hey, I'm glad to see some challenge.
Jesus Christ, this looks pretty serious. I need you to give me footage of whatever caused this, okay? Get around there, I want to see what's going on the other. Jeez! What the hell is that? Get out there, fully capture that boy. Woo! There we go, man. Behind that contract, there may be a future for you after all, kid.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so going forward. We want to fully execute the game's vision while anticipating and avoiding potential pitfalls. I'm going to go into the larger additions or expansions we anticipate we are going to make and we are going to execute. However, I'm going to mention a few other additions that I'm not going to do brief threat analyses on. So for now, we are going to implement a tool for a rotating pool of objectives and bonuses, so that each time you play the game, you can have a different set of objectives and bonuses to keep the experience fresh each time you play. We'll have a still photograph functionality. That wasn't in place for our prototype, but that is a key component where you can take your photographs and then review them after the game and be able to look at your experiences. But that will also serve a gameplay purpose where you might need to capture a subject that is very, very elusive. And in the case of actually taking a still photograph, you can earn all of the points from the subject instantaneously, but you have to time it right. Also, we'll have the presence of hostile ground soldier aliens. This will foundationally alter the way that the player navigates the environment and navigates through threats. So the expansion of the playable space. I want to talk about scope. A discussion that a lot of us have had on focal length is scale versus depth. Would we rather have a massive giant game, or would we rather have a smaller environment with depth? And the resounding answer is we want depth. The picture on your left, that is not what we're making. We're not making a city. 20 to 30 buildings is far more on point with what we are going to accomplish. And this is not out of the realm of experience from what has been done in Capstone before. So 20 to 30 buildings in a small section of a city is really what's going to be ideal. And the orientation of the buildings within the city will allow us to expand scale or lower it as needed. In our green light, we had buildings very close together, always touching each other, more of a downtown area. And we can absolutely play around with actually having buildings spaced out to buy us some scale at a very feasible price. So this is a video of our art showcase where we have the actual assets of what we could do for the city. This is a variation of the actual level we had in the prototype gameplay we showed. And you can see that the buildings they have flavor, yet they can be repeated and built at a very feasible price. And I'll go into this after the video more with a more organized discussion. However, you can see in this environment that there is a strong presence of chaos and debris and destruction. Rubble will play a role in being able to have repeatable assets that fill out the environment in addition to cars. Now with our fiction, you can see that by a lot of the billboards there is black hole technology, which is really humanity's response to the energy crisis. And this may or may not be the reasons that the aliens are paying a visit. I'll just tease that. And then the cubes are also a part of our fiction. The cubes serve as the aliens' way of offering humanity a way to surrender by touching a cube and teleporting to an alien holding facility, allowing the destruction of Earth, yet the conquering of humanity to be as efficient as possible for the alien species. Now, in this case, this is a picture of our actual level prototype. Now, this piece was used to create the entire base of this scene that we're seeing here. And then from there are two set piece modules that we've used in this to really alter the face of this, of the scene. And then in addition to that, there are billboards and the holographic trees. Now, these elements required very little modeling time for us, and yet we managed to create this environment convincingly. But that's not the only tactic we will use in creating this environment of the 20 to 30 buildings. The modularity will only be a supplemental technique. We will build entire set piece buildings that will be incorporated for visual differentiation. So these two techniques in tandem with one another will absolutely make this project in scope for our current team. So deepening our playable space. By deepening our playable space, I mean actually populating our scenes and making it a convincing and immersive atmosphere to be in. And part of that will be simply populating the level to make it feel like a city in chaos. And this will come down to incorporation of naturally repeatable objects, and this will help with the feasibility of our project. By incorporating the presence of human military in the tanks. That's an example of an object that is very understandable to be a repeatable object. The same case for street lights, bus stations, benches, and trash cans are all repeatable objects that we can use to really fill out the scene. And then in addition to that, we have a presence of cars and automobiles. And the bottom left is an example of taking one single model of a car and then slightly altering it. And then with that, we can create variability in addition with that with textures to really fill out the environment. Forward, please. Okay, and then crafting non-playable characters. For the majority of our NPCs in the environment, they're passing by you very quick. They're running. You don't really get a chance to see them very close up. For this reason, we'll be using low poly models that will compose the bulk of our NPC pool for movement. In this case, this will help us with the demands on our actual system, making sure we don't get bogged down. And then we will have 4 to 5 high-quality set-piece NPCs for scenes requiring greater detail. Meaning that you need to get a close-up of someone dying, as an example. And then we will be improving the NPC crowds. For our Greenlight prototype, we used Kismet and UDK to handle our crowd. This was to free up our programmers' time. However, we will be, going forward, handling this programmatically with flocking AI. A potential challenge with this is that it could become very demanding on our system the more citizens we have. However, to handle that challenge, we will be populating the world dynamically based on the player's location. As it stands in our current prototype, if there is a citizen in the environment, they exist, even if you are in the area or not. That will not be the case in the final game. We'll also be creating spectacular scenes. For our game, the scenes matter because that's what you're filming. That's the very subject matter that needs to have flavor and be good. So with this, this will be accomplished feasibly by using assets that are already in use as the principal subject matter for these scenes that we construct. We'll be using tanks, the police models, and alien ships. And the unique one-time use assets will be minimal. At the bottom, excuse me, at the bottom left, you can see an effect we have for when a human actually gets shot and vaporized in this case. And so we can use the assets that we already have on hand to be able to create the experience that we're after. So this has been Focal Length. The team is very excited to continue with this project. And we think that it is a phenomenal learning opportunity and a phenomenal opportunity for FIEA. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Yes.
So you talked a lot about the art, but I kind of want to know a little bit more about gameplay. So who is this game really for?
Who's this game really for?
Yeah, who's it for? And I'll have a follow-up.
The target demographic for this would be the Call of Duty player that is typically a thinking man that would like a different spin on a first-person shooter and is perhaps into photography.
Okay, so that's what I figured you would say. And my response to that is a Call of Duty player, they want like particle effects and explosions and that sort of stuff. And you had some explosions and whatnot, but like when you're focusing the camera, that's the delay of you looking at something and then waiting for the little reticle to kind of get smaller and stuff. Like, that I don't feel like that has the real like feedback that a Call of Duty player would want. So what do you plan on doing to? You mentioned the snapshot thing, like the photos. I think that's a good push in that direction to get like that immediate feedback.
Yeah.
So what other sorts of things are you considering for that?
The discussion of balance and timing. Timing is huge for our game, and that's where we paid a lot of attention with this last week getting this up and running. So timing is absolutely, the timing of those brackets actually closing to where you get those drama bonuses, and all of those bonuses for that matter, is really something that is a matter of tweaking. However, at this point, we'll make sure that if there's something that happens instantaneously, the feedback for that should not be a drawn-out process. So that's something that we'll take iteration for. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. I guess really, you know, when I've got like, let's say I have a sniper rifle in Call of Duty, I line it up and then I pull the trigger and then it's like bam, you know, the bullet goes and then there's blood spattering and all that other feedback that you get. But with this game, it's like you look at something and I don't feel like I'm getting that response.
Okay.
I guess it's more of a comment and less of a question. So.
Thank you. Yes.
So it kind of goes to what he's going for, but I noticed it in your game in that essentially games like this and first-person shooters are based off a really simple mechanic. It's aim and shoot. I think that you've got an issue, and I'm curious as to how you're going to approach it, in that in your demonstration, all of your player education happens after the aim. After the aim. So all of the voices being triggered after you aim at something, then it's telling you what to shoot at. So like your pitch was, you know, you're going to be going through your environment and looking at things and wanting to aim and shoot, but actually there's no reason why you wouldn't just aim the entire time. So what he's trying to describe is that in Call of Duty what happens is that a target appears, you pull the left trigger to aim, mechanic A, you pull the right trigger to shoot, mechanic B, and feedback happens. What's happening in your game is that left trigger aim mechanic, there's no reason why you wouldn't want that always to be on, because all of your feedback and everything that's happening afterwards is happening on the LB and the RB. And so
At this
Is there a
point-
reason why you just don't have the camera HUD up all?
Yes, one of the ways we're going to handle that is when you sprint to be able to weave in and out of crowds when you're vaulting, that's automatically going to take your camera up. So efficiently moving throughout the city is often going to come at the price that you're not always filming. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, but doesn't that make it less fun?
No, it's a payoff, in my opinion. I mean, it's a balance. I mean, sometimes you can't always be aiming in Call of Duty either. There's a balance.
Okay. Second question that I have is another fun question. What kind of subjects and what kind of balance on the subjects? So we saw a few. We saw some humans and we saw some aliens. What kind of subject balance are you thinking of for the game?
For ratio of like how many aliens for how many people?
Or generally, what do you think people are going to be taking pictures of?
They will be taking pictures of chaos, injury, a lot of times, and then alien presence, especially for ships. And then humanoid aliens will be a rarer occurrence, but that will be at play, but it will be rarer, I would say.
The question that comes from that is, do you think that people are going to enjoy taking pictures of suffering? Like most people take pictures of things that they want to celebrate. I mean, war photography is about informing people. It's not about, gore porn. So
right.
How are you going to make people feel like that's fun?
It's going to be a balance. If that's not fun, which I think it's a fair argument, then maybe we'll have to tone that part of it down. Then that's what we'll do ultimately. We don't want to, try to force some subject matter that isn't going to be received appropriately. But it's something that is absolutely adjustable and balanced within our game. So, Ron.
I was just wondering, like, there seemed to be a lot of pictures that he was taking of like people on the ground, and they seem to be like the same photo that you were taking over and over again. You know, it's like there's a couple, somebody injured there, somebody injured there.
Right.
Are you gonna incorporate some sort of balance of like repeated photos of the same?
No, this was mainly for a prototype of populating it with not a whole lot of assets. But part of the believability of our environment is making sure that when we do use repeatable objects, that it's believable. Right now, as it stands, that isn't very believable. It was mainly for populating the world economically with the time we had. So,
I guess what I was more asking was like, are you rewarded based on taking varieties of pictures?
That's a good question. Right now, we're taking sort of the Tony Hawk approach, where if you try to do the same trick over and over again, you're going to get less points for it as you go. So if the player will need to vary the subject matter of what they're filming. And we'll give the player audio feedback for that, so your news network producer will be like, hey, that's great, but you're giving me the same thing over and over again. So absolutely, we'll give some variation to that. Ron.
Nice presentation, Tim. So I did have a question, moving back to Zach's early demo. There was a discussion of the rule of thirds, and I was just curious where you guys landed on that idea.
The rule of thirds is something that we are trying to incorporate that's an inherent part of being a better player. So in the case that I have a subject right here, right in front of me, but I want to film Daniel, the good player will obey that rule of thirds and get both of them in the shot. And I think that is going to be a natural consequence of trying to score points as efficiently as possible. The rule of thirds is something that we are hesitant to actually enforce, as we worry that it could come across as being an element that is counterintuitive to what people have learned in first-person shooters, which is to aim directly at what you want to shoot or capture. So at this point, we're not pursuing that as something we're going to enforce, but it would be great to have it be a natural consequence of our mechanics.
Good answer.
Yes.
So I'm wondering where you're at on the story aspect of your game. I'm kind of wondering where the fun is at too. You know, where I can see if this was Cloverfield and it was horror, or it was very first person. I'm running around and I'm scared all the time. That's compelling. But I'm wondering. So I'm wondering where your story is. You alluded a little bit to story in your presentation, but I'm wondering if there's what makes me want to do this. You know, besides the meter, besides me You know, what compels me to move through this space?
Right. At this point, for the playable character, he is trying to get a full-time job with this news network. Right now, he is trying to gain a contract. At this point, he's still the rookie, and we tried to allude to that a bit with the actual dialogue that we had, that if you want to get the job, you need to do this the right way. The deeper fiction of, like, the broad fiction of why the aliens are invading, that fiction is still something that is in development. It hasn't been a strong focus for Greenlight as much. However, I would say...
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, you're saying is that's not really the point of your game, is the story aspect.
Not for Greenlight, it hasn't. It's something that's going to get equal focus. We believe that every aspect needs to be like on point with each other, but for Greenlight, we have really been concentrating on gameplay as really being king. So
sure, I don't question that. I'm just saying is the idea of your game. The idea of your game is not about story.
It's about immersion in an environment. So no, it's not about story. Yes.
I did have a question about you as the player, you and your interaction with the things that are going on. Like, it almost seemed like there could be this choice that you have to make between getting the shot or actually helping somebody that's in need. Like, is there anything that you can actively do to say, like, there's an attack going on? Can you engage in that moment and break up that fight? Or are you only trying to say, like, hey, come eat me, I'm over here?
At this point, for scope's sake, I would say the second is really our first option. We are absolutely going to explore ways for the player to have more agency in the environment, excuse me, for interactions in which the player would actually be able to play a more vital role in the actual outcome of the environment. But for now, for scope, we're really trying to nail down these mechanics and make sure they function well and are fun.
Have you guys given much thought to what, the over? Could you describe what tone you want from the game?
Yes, the overall tone would be akin to Jurassic Park, where there is chaos everywhere and there's a lot of death, even dismemberment, and yet the film can almost be described as uplifting in some ways. It's very adventurous, so we're definitely going for more of an adventurous tone. Certainly not a Children of Men tone.
So, I think just as a small piece of advice, when the Dead Rising team, when I was still at Capcom, when the Dead Rising team was working on a very similar mechanic, right? That was to provide a lot of levity to Dead Rising. Like, that was the intention there, was to kind of, you spend all this time just hacking and slashing zombies constantly. How are we going to provide levity? And you're doing a lot of similar things to what Dead Rising did, was like kind of scoring, the kind of classical Japanese scoring system stuff.
Right.
And that's all really interesting, but if you don't nail your tone, and I think this might go a little bit to your narrative point, if you don't nail your tone on this, it will be, you will probably encounter the same issues that BioShock Infinite has, which is not a whole bunch of people want to go home and play races in the game. And not a whole bunch of people want to go home and play let's get pictures of human suffering. So
Okay.
you might want to focus on tone.
That will be something we really think about. Yes. This is the last one.
Not to sound like a jerk, although it probably wouldn't be the first time. You said that your demographic was Call of Duty players who's also a thinking man. That's got to be like the tiniest slice on a Venn diagram.
Right. All right.
I mean, where the two circles intersect.
Thanks for the questions. No. Keep
going. But not to say that that's not, like, that this game is
Right.
not enjoyable. I just don't think that's really the demographic. I think it's probably more people who are interested in, like, narrative, more like non-traditional gameplay experiences.
Okay.
Aside from that, why, maybe it's just something I don't understand about how the slices are being done this year, but I saw the art in the art thing. Why didn't the art from the art thing go into
the process this year was, it was made clear early on and changed later in the process that art should not be in the actual playable demonstration and that we should have a separate showcase for the art. We were choosing to honor that with just having white and gray checkers, even though it was changed. So that's the reason that level looks like it. It's not because we couldn't implement it, it's because we didn't want to, because we wanted to prove that gameplay could stand on its own.
All right, so I feel like you guys did an admirable job of showcasing how difficult it is to get a journalism job.
Thank you.
Let's have a big welcome for Welcome.
Alright, I want to apologize for how long it took us to set up. There's some significant technical hurdles that we had to get by in order to get this to present. But to you all, I say good day. I'm Amer, and I will be your host for tonight's activities. So I hope you all join me as I extend the proverbial hand and we sink into some of the darker aspects of our human nature, our greed, our appetites, and our self-destruction. Now, Welcome is a game where you have two opponents engaging in asymmetrical play. You have firstly the visitor. The visitor is in a home, he's exploring, like it says up there. The fear master is the invisible hand controlling the action. The visitor, while he is in the home, must collect a number of amulet shards. And he must take those amulet shards to an altar. And once he does that, his objective is completed. And the fear master's objective, I think, will be obvious. So, with that said, let us begin. So as you can see, what you saw on that screen over there, where Tommy was operating the Fear Master, that was his heads-up display. Now, this is a more polished version of what we were imagining we want the Fear Master display to operate like. So you can see there's a number of abilities lined up down here. These three over here on the side, we are calling them free abilities. Now these abilities don't have a cost on this FIEA meter that you'll see over here, but most abilities that you will use in this game will. The ones that can cause you real gameplay damage, and that can potentially trap you and leave you vulnerable. And these ones over here are the ones that have a cost. And every time you use one of these, it depletes a little bit of your FIEA meter. And depending on the intensity of the action that you use, for example, summoning the monster itself, it might take up more or less. And using these abilities over here, which are the free abilities, for example, we had the lights turning off, we had lightning, things of that nature, we had sounds trigger, just out of context in the level. And those sorts of things do not have an actual gameplay effect on the visitor, but they create atmosphere. And the idea behind this is to create a rhythm or a cadence where you have these small little scares where just a little bit of a bump, and a little bit of a bump, and a little bit of a bump. And then eventually you have that big moment where something really shocking will happen. And that's what these things here are for. And eventually, as you play, the FIEA meter builds up itself. And with this, as the longer you spend in the level, the more deadly it gets. And the layout of the level itself is also reflective of that. It's somewhat labyrinthine. So if you're not careful and you're not aware of your surroundings at any time, it's very easy to get lost and set yourself in a corner. So did you want to demonstrate some of the FIEA master abilities? So as you can see, this is the FIEA master interface. When you click on a part of the room, this is the entire map that we were playing in just now. This represents the player for the purposes of this prototype. As you can see here, this is the lightning, which was just activated. And you can see its effect on the entire level as you move. And you also have this view over here. We'll call it the surveillance camera, where you can see exactly what the visitor is seeing at any given time. And these are the three abilities I talked about earlier that are free and don't have any cost on this FIEA meter, which we have our prototype version up over here. And this lets the FIEA master know how many amulets have been collected by the visitor at any given time. And these are our abilities over here. This was that scary face that you guys all screamed at. This is the door, and one of the main objectives of our game is we wanted to make it interesting to mix and match abilities so that there's a level of strategy and a level of intellect that's going on, not only with the FIEA master, for example, webbing up a door and then unleashing the monster so that they have to mash F and declaw the door essentially before they can leave, but also for the player themselves as the visitor. We want those moments where they're in there and they're trying to outsmart or outmaneuver the monster, and they can they can try to do head fakes and things of that nature. So this is an example of balance, not necessarily by parity, by giving them the exact same abilities, but through objective. And our job as designers is to make sure that balance really sticks and works. And just some of the other abilities that we saw, just so you guys are clear. This is the sound trigger that activates a random noise. This is the light, the blackout, which will shut off any light that the player is looking at the moment. This is the thunder that you guys all saw earlier. This is that scary effect that everyone screamed at again. We're calling it the psych bomb for now. This is the door webbing that you guys saw and you see reflected on the map over here. These are the eggs that you guys saw drop. Right now we have them set so that they're on preset locations in the level. So another element of our gameplay that we really wanted to emphasize was trying to sort of corral the visitor while you are the FIEA master into strategic locations where maybe you can drop an egg on them or you can trap them in a corner, because you are at any given time able to see where the amulets are, but the player has to navigate the level and find out where they are. And this is the ceiling web, which comes down, and you saw he had to mash F on the screen in order to free himself. And this, of course, is the monster itself, which was fairly obvious. As you can see, when it first instantiates in the level, it comes in a cocoon. And one of the interesting things we discovered while we were playtesting the game is at least at first, when people first see that cocoon in the level, even though right now it's a basic Unity primitive, they're kind of intrigued by it. They say, what is this thing? They go close to it, and then they're kind of examining it, and then all of a sudden the thing just pops out, and you hear a loud sound, and they recoil back, and we get those scary moments you get the double whammy of having an interesting gameplay mechanic, as well as something that produces a visceral fear, which is both cerebral and, like I said, visceral. So let's switch over back to the slide. And that's essentially what we're going for with the FIEA master versus the visitor here. The analogy that I really like is that of a fighting game, and not necessarily hit points and super moves and things of that nature, but the idea of two people going at it and using their intellect to try to outsmart each other, trying to do head fakes, and really trying to get those interesting moments where you see that cerebral action really represented on the screen, and you're playing as much as you're thinking. And this is an example of one of our art goals that we wanted to go for here. So let's see, this thing's giving me a little bit of trouble, so I'll just click on it to the side. So some of the atmospheric light and the mood that you guys saw reflected in our level. But this is the sort of goal that we want to achieve. This sort of like dusty fog atmosphere look. And as you can see with the spider monster, he has his eggs and everything. That eerie glow that you guys saw on the level, which both serves as not only something that's creepy, but also as landmarks in the level. So that because it's so labyrinthine in nature, it's important that key landmarks be in there so the player knows where they are at any given time, if they've been paying attention. And here's a more refined version of our model. An example of something we could do if given more time and apply that same level of polish to the entire level. And now I want to talk about something interesting. As you guys saw with the FIEA master screen, it's kind of a touch screen, almost like an interface where you want to get in there, you can touch it. It's not so much like action, but you can get in there and you kind of want to click on the rooms and you want to click on an ability. So one of the things we really wanted to get was that second screen experience that's been somewhat popular in games these days. You'll see it in things like the new Deus Ex Director's Cut, or in Assassin's Creed where you have like an iPhone app, or the entire premise of the Wii U, for example, where you have something that you can control remotely. And I think giving the players the option to play off-screen on something like the PlayStation Vita is a really cool idea, and something that just fits naturally in our game. And we are already certified as PlayStation Mobile developers, and we've been making some really nice progress, I believe, on the PlayStation Vita, which we will demonstrate for you right now.
I'm sorry?
Switch with my voice.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a live demo of it, so you'll have to forgive like any technical hiccups. But you can see it. I'm sorry, it's a bit hard to see for some people in the audience. The little example, it being demonstrated on this television figure. And as you can see, we have right now a prototype version of our interface that we had going on the screen over here on the PlayStation Vita. And you're able to actually touch the abilities and activate them inside the game right now. So we have things drawn into the Vita, and we also have the ability to interact with our Unity prototype. So it's something that we can really get in and get working. And we'll pull up the Unity prototype here so we can demonstrate these abilities in action. As you can see, this is the general, when you break down the shape of the level, essentially, we wanted something that was both non-linear, because when we've been prototyping with linear sorts of levels where you can walk and there's these certain moments where it's easier or harder to trigger a trap, we thought it would be more interesting if we gave it a slightly more labyrinthine structure where you have a more non-linear aspect going on with the gameplay, and there's more possibility to get lost, for example, or go exploring and actually feel like you're in a house exploring and experiencing a haunted place. All right. Demonstrate the ability there.
All right, so you can see we have the actual mini-map updating on the bottom with the lovely placeholder spaceship for our player. If you want to go ahead and move around a little bit, Michael, so you can see the mini-map's actually updated. And then I can cast abilities on any of these rooms by touching a room and a button. So I can make lightning happen here just with a quick tap. Let me take off this glove. This glove. He's interfering with my view.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. All right, or we could spawn a monster in here just as easily. Spawns over there by the window. Or use any of the abilities. And this is actually working with all our abilities on all the rooms right now, except for door webbing, because we need to work out a new minimap interface that lets the door be a little easier to hit on the smaller Vita screen, which we're aware of. We just haven't made a new map yet. So, are there any abilities people would like me to cast to prove that we're actually doing stuff?
Yeah.
Hey, do the face.
Do the face.
Is
that what we're calling now?
Do you want to go stand near the eggs, Michael, and we'll do the eggs that was also
Oh yeah, sure.
This guy's kind of weird, really. So, Well, I don't think you were looking at them, but they
Here, I'll send here. To the map.
So there we go. And also, two things I forgot to mention while we're still in the Unity prototype here. We also have some abilities which are just passive abilities in this stage. Places you want to avoid, for example, eggs that are just in the level themselves. As the spiders crawl on you, it slows down your movement. And that is to make it easier for you to be captured by the monster. So you want to avoid those places as well as some like fun effects, like you get near a TV and it'll start blinking in and out. Things of that nature to really sell the atmosphere. But yeah, with that, let's switch back to the slides.
Where do you want? Which one? So that's essentially where we're going with PlayStation Vita. So we've been, like I said earlier, we've been certified already as PlayStation Mobile developers. And we've gotten some nice headway on the Vita, so we know that we can interact with our Unity script. And I imagine a sort of scenario where we have one person sitting on a couch playing, interacting with the PlayStation Vita, another one on a screen, for example, like you saw over here. And he's looking at him and he's observing him. But at the same time, they're kind of playing together in an interesting way. And I want to talk about how this project has benefits to all three of the tracks that we have here at FIEA. So stuff for producers, obviously things like design and balance are huge considerations, especially when you have a sort of competitive multiplayer element. The abilities that we've been creating, as well as the balance of those abilities, is something that's extremely crucial to make sure that it's a fun game to play. And obviously for programmers, all those abilities need to be programmed and prototyped and iterated upon. As well as the actual look of the level, like the target render that I showed you guys earlier. That's something that I would really, I imagine would take a lot of like nice shader knowledge and things of that nature, as well as some of the interesting spider effects we have going on with webs and such. And for artists, I think I've been throwing in little art stuff from our wonderful art staff up there, and I think that's really been exemplifying the sort of imagination that you can display while you're working on Welcome. And so refining the game going forward. So assuming we get through Greenlight, one of the things I want to focus on really, our original plan was to focus on multiple monsters and to have different scenarios where you have you have a different monster reflecting a different sort of atmosphere. So you might enter like, a children's playhouse or a spider sort of lair like you had over here. So we want to just focus on one going forward. We feel this is a nice way to curb some of our scope considerations. I would much, much rather have one really, really excellent level layout that we can play and demonstrate, and that which would work well, and that would produce like reactions like the type you guys saw today, versus having multiple monsters where they're all pretty good, but then none of them are quite excellent. So I'd really like us to specialize on one, and I imagine we'd be focusing on this one going forward. And I want to expand him as the third leg of our power struggle. So I used the analogy earlier of a fighting game where you have two players matching wits with each other. And essentially, the monster here, Mockery, is what we've been calling him. He is essentially a pawn in this battle. So he can be controlled by the Fear Master in certain ways to go in certain directions. So we really feel like if we expand the AI for him and have things where you would be able to influence his movement instead of having him act just as a homing missile that goes straight at the player, as well as having the player being able to maneuver the environment in certain ways that take advantage of that AI. We think that would be like an interesting way to have that sort of power dynamic visually represented. As well as this is something we alluded to with the end of our demo when you guys saw that climactic finale and we segued into a different part of the home. One of the reasons we want to focus on one monster in particular and really polish it up is because we want to segment the gameplay. And by that I mean we have certain levels where, for example, what you guys just saw might be the first part of a haunted house and you have your first objective there. But then once that is completed, then you enter a more labyrinthine and a more deadly area where maybe more abilities are unlocked for the Fear Master, things of that nature. And finally, I want to just talk a little bit about the project in general. So our development story so far, we learned a lot of lessons. This is every member of the team, as far as I can tell. Zach was the man behind the camera, so unfortunately we weren't able to get him, but if you guys want to take a look at him, he's right there. He's much better in person. But one of the things I learned, because this is for many of us, like the reason we're here at FIEA, we're learning a lot of lessons while we're working on these games.
And one of the things at least for me personally as a project lead, decision making has been a big thing. And there have been times in the project where in order to reach consensus, like you were talking about earlier, JP, I would stall a decision, or I would say, let's wait it out a little bit. And sometimes that's the right decision, but other times you really just have to kind of put your foot down. And that's something I'm getting better at every day, but it's still something I struggle with. And I think this has been a tremendous learning opportunity for not just myself, but for the entire team in that regard. Scope, something I also alluded to. As like scope, as we've all seen on every single one of our games so far, it's been something that's really, you can take it as far as you want in your mind, but when you have to get down in there, you have to get practical and you have to actually produce something. We really want to go for that refined, polished nature, and I think matching the scope with the size of our team is something that we've been managing this entire, essentially I view this like first process as a way of getting to a place where we can manage our scope effectively, and I think that's really been something that we would like to improve going forward, as well as things like organization, obviously like team planning, things of that nature. And playtesting is an interesting one because early on in the demo, while we were producing this product, we were afraid to playtest because there were so many variables, as you guys saw in our game, so many abilities, so many things going back and forth, that I was afraid to actually playtest the game. I didn't want to put it in front of people and ask them for their opinions because I was worried, I knew bugs existed in this and this and this area. And then when we actually finally got down to doing the playtests, then when we had people, they experienced the bugs that we were expecting, but their insight was so useful that I had only wished that I had done it earlier, because it had helped shape some of the things going into the last leg of the project. And that experience, I just wish that's something that we could do earlier. And now that that's something that I understand the value of, I think that we could really take this project going forward into nice places. And last thing I want to talk about is a work-life, or not, when you're here at FIEA, you don't really have a life, but other work for other classes, balance. And that's something that we've been still struggling with and will continue to struggle with. But I think that's a tremendous learning opportunity, and Welcome really provides that. So with that said, I'll welcome any questions from the audience.
So, I like your game idea a lot. I don't necessarily know if I like your game.
Okay.
And I've got a really kind of core question that I think needs to be answered before I think you've really got a game. Can the player die? The player did not die in the demo, and it didn't look like anything that the Scaremaster was doing.
We disabled death for the purpose of presentation, but absolutely you're able to fail at your objective.
So, the objective is gathering these pieces, right?
Right.
And so failing is dying, i.e. you cannot gather these pieces.
Correct.
What's the fun in your game?
So in my summation of the idea, like I said, we were going back to that fighting game analogy. The ability of being able to navigate a level where like the pieces will be programmatically placed in different areas, and seeing what an experienced playmaster, for example, like if I was playing, well, I don't want to go too much into the fighting game analogy, but the idea of taking one person with a certain set of abilities and another with a certain set, and having them try to match wits with whatever tools they have in their stake. So the essential goal, I think, and the fun would be knowing that you outsmarted an actual human player as opposed to an AI.
I think you're close, but I think you don't understand what the fun is in your game. And the fun in your game is much simpler than that. The fun in your game is you waiting outside that door for me to walk out and screaming boo. And me getting scared. That's the fun in your game. And you saw it when everybody saw that face and that reaction and everybody was like, yeah, right? That's where the fun in your game is. And you've got all these ideas, it feels like, that touch on that fun, but don't push you on that direction. So when you were doing this, I was writing on my tablet companion app. And then you showed the companion app and I was like, all right, so they kind of get it. And then the scenarios that you're presenting for the companion app didn't feel like they were tying back into your fun, right? So I thought about the companion app and I was like, I want to be on a couch next to somebody playing this on the TV and using that companion app and scaring the crap out of it. I don't even necessarily care if they die. I just want to see if I can scare them. And I'm going to be right next to them while they're getting scared, so I'm going to get enjoyment out of that, and then we can laugh and enjoy ourselves and have a great time about it. And like when you were showing the Playmaster screen, you're so close to the perfect idea for this, and that you're showing the video of what the player's seeing. I don't want to see that video. I want to see the player. And we've got Kinect, and we've got PlayStation Eye, and this iPad has a camera on it. I want to see the player if I'm the Scaremaster, because I want to see how I'm scaring.
Right.
So I think that you've got all these analogies about how you want it to be a fighting game, or how you want it to be all of these things, but your core mechanic of where your fun lies is something far more visceral and simple. And I think that you can probably, all of the issues that you're worried about scope and about what abilities you want and things like that, if you think your core mechanic down instead of up, you're going to be in a much better place.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic insight. Thank you. Carl.
Touching on something that JP said about the Fear Master not necessarily being an adversary, but an enhancer of the core experience of the person going through the haunted house. I believe the Ju-On game for Wii did exactly that sort of thing, where the second player was puppeteering some things going on in the haunted house. But my other question is, does there really need to be a goal for that? Or the question was, you're putting these two people against each other as adversaries, but then what I saw demonstrated there and the examples you gave didn't really demonstrate to me how the human player, the visitor, could get one over on the Fear Master. It seemed like the Fear Master had all of the power in the world, locking doors and trapping you in there with a spider monster, and you couldn't really do anything except the one example that you kept returning to was juke the guy, but then you're still stuck in the room.
Right.
So where is your power as the visitor to do any sort of activating?
Right. I think going into this project, the Fear Master was understandably like a big concern of ours, I think. Getting those abilities to play right, getting that tech to work right, getting all that to work right. And then once we had that working, and it's like the visitor, his balance is as a response to the Fear Master. So as the Fear Master's abilities grow and they're stronger or whatever, then going back to those ideas that we would like to implement, I think expanding the visitor is something we've talked heavily about in our meetings, as well as design. I think that's something that going forward we would really like to implement, and we've had discussions to that regard. So certainly I think that's a great insight. Thank you. Paul.
So what have you guys accomplished design-wise since pitch? This was one of my favorite games at pitch. I thought this was such a clever idea, and the idea of the execution on the Vita, absolutely awesome. I really dig the companion app, and I dig that you've done something kind of unique to FIEA yet. We haven't seen anything done on the Vita yet, so that's all cool. But I'm wondering, how does this differ, or was it such a solid design at the beginning that you didn't need to change it?
It's actually changed in very, very significant ways. The most obvious to me is that in the very beginning, the Fear Master itself, it derives its name from the idea of like a dungeon master, and like a D&D game, and the idea of not necessarily toying with the player, but giving them an experience. And we wanted to tie that into more like traditional gameplay mechanics, where you have two people in a competition sort of setting. So that whole competitive aspect is something that we introduced, and we feel like through our balance is something that we can bear out into like a strong game design.
Okay. Of course, that goes directly against what JP was just recommending, which was, that doesn't really matter. The piece that matters is scaring your buddy. The question I would have then would be, did you prototype at all tools for making this extensible so that it's not just the same room, the same scenario every time? What tools does I don't mean the actual physical implementation on the Vita. I'm talking about how does this change from one from one game session to another? Does the Fear Master have a suite of tools that they can use to customize the experience?
Currently, the customization aspect was something that was heavily talked about early on in the project, level builders and things of that nature. But due to scope considerations, we wanted to focus specifically on getting those abilities and having that the player's touch, essentially, I think what you're referring to with customization in a broader sense, reflected in the way he uses the abilities that are provided within the layouts that we provide them.
Okay.
Adam?
Why the Vita versus some other touchscreen device?
Vita consideration was something we wanted to get experience working, first of all, on an actual console SDK, which is something that you don't often get, especially even in a program like FIEA. We often work on PCs exclusively, or occasionally we dabble on mobile and things of that nature. But we really wanted to get the artists and the producers, and especially the programmers, used to working to those console specifications. As well as the fact that it is also very easy to become a PlayStation Mobile developer and push your product to the PlayStation Mobile market. So going forward, that's something that we would like to explore. And we think the Vita provides a good opportunity for that as a student portfolio showcase.
So is this going to be exclusively for Vita, or are you going to try to use other devices that
Certainly, I think going, for our purposes, for the scope of our project, where it goes after, if it gets past greenlight and we get it full game made and all that, I think the sky's the limit, but for now, the scope is on getting the Vita to work as best as possible within our current experience.
Because I agree that it's incredibly invaluable experience to be able to practice that, especially before you actually enter the industry.
Right.
But as far as like the game goes, it seems like that's an incredibly small market, given all of the other touch devices, and you have to have, I guess, a computer and a Vita, or ideally a PlayStation 3 and a Vita, or PlayStation 4 and a Vita, and it just seems like there would be better and more open avenues to go if you had the time.
Once marketability is more of a factor in the game, and we feel like it's coalescing, then we will certainly explore those other options. I think.
When I watch this game, I can't help but compare it to other like jumpy horror games like Slender or Amnesia. And I think one of the things that can make a game a lot better is to find a way to get the Scaremaster, whatever his name is, to become aggressively stronger. Like to start off the first room with being able to summon like the big bad monsters, like I could see that being like after 2 games in that strategy, then it's just like, okay, where do I go from there? The more amulets they collect, then you can like make monsters bigger or stronger.
Right. That's exactly what I wanted to address when I was talking about segmenting the gameplay.
Okay.
That consideration exactly. So I'm glad you brought it up.
It feels like the two main core pillars of this game are like the atmospheric horror experience and the multiplayer competitive experience. But I feel like there's a lot of tension between the two. Because in an atmospheric game, you play it once, maybe twice, you soak in the atmosphere, and then with the exposure, it really starts to like degrade how scared you get because you know the types of things that can happen.
Right.
Whereas in a competitive game, you want to play it tens, hundreds, thousands of times to gain mastery and defeat your opponent.
Right, and that's the exact reason.
I was going to ask, do you find that like, I'm sure you guys have played this hundreds of times, like do you still like feel the atmosphere and get scared while you're playing, or
Yeah,
do you?
absolutely. I still feel it to this day, and I think like our team will testify to it that one of the reasons we wanted that human element incorporated into the game is because it makes it more scary. Instead of something where an AI would determine where something goes and this and that, and it's all procedural. It's randomization that takes care of all that. If we give that to an actual player, then the things they can think up are things that we would never even imagine. So novel like uses of combinations of abilities, things of that nature. You get different players in the game, you get completely different experiences. So I think that high level of replayability is absolutely a big consideration for a game. And that's one reason we really want to refine our scope.
Thank you. And Amber, if I can touch on that?
Yes.
One thing we're also doing is we're tying a lot of our free abilities into like Pavlovian effects on other abilities. So you get kind of this evolution where when somebody plays the game a lot, for example, whenever you spawn the monster, lightning goes off, which is also one of your free abilities. So it creates an interesting effect where when you've played a lot, some of the jump scares are gone, but you've got like this deeper understanding of what that just meant. So I'll be in a room playing with Michael or Amber, and the lightning will go off, and then I'm frantically looking around for that giant capsule. Because I'm like, oh man, did he spawn the monster here? Did he spawn the monster next door? Because I need to start running away, and then sometimes you guess poorly, you run out of the room and he's spawned in the hallway, and you open the door and he's right there. And it's a different experience. So I don't think it's bad that people get used to some things, because we're trying to bake that into some of the free abilities to actually play on the fact that you've learned to get something.
Right. And jumping off of that, like
I know JP, like the concern you brought up, that was also something like in the very beginning of the project. At the conceptual phases, we were thinking exactly in that same sort of vein. But one of the things we discovered is once you take away that like actual fear of death, quote unquote, or a fear of loss or some sort of like negative game reinforcement, then we felt that some of that scariness also went away. So it was in order to preserve that very sort of like scariness that we decided to make that decision to give it that competitive aspect.
I think that I don't think that death is like antithetical to your game, right?
Right.
Like death can work in your mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's what makes your game fun, right? Like the fear is not fear of dying. The fear is fear of being scared. And you have an interesting metagame that I don't think you've touched on, is that if you are the dude on the couch
Right.
playing on the app while somebody else is playing that game, it is just as fun and funny for you to turn and scream in your friend's ear and be like, ah, right? Your game doesn't end on the app or in there because your game is playing not on a game mechanic but on a human emotion.
Mhm.
So when you like make these, and this is just me going slightly tangential, but
Right.
I think that you have a very big risk in your game to over-design it to the point where you will design out that fun,
Right.
right? Whereas your fun is so simple and over here that the less you design it and the more emergent you make it, the more people are going to be able to get to that fun quicker.
Yeah.
So if that fear of dying is, right, like there's tons of things that you can do. If you've got those bugs crawling up you and it just makes that player movement slower,
Right.
then you're giving him more time to figure out where he's going to put that spider dude. So when, instead of that spider dude just spawning in the room, you could spawn it in the room next door.
Right,
And by
exactly.
the time they get to that door and open it, because they've been slowed down with these spiders, then you're going to have to, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the impetus for a lot of these like gameplay considerations as well, because they set up those moments and they kind of not coax, but maybe suggest to the player certain uses of the abilities that they might not have thought of on their own.
And I mean, Spider Dude could steal amulets, right? Like you get hit by the spider guy, he steals the amulet and he runs away, and now you have to go get that amulet back from another room. You don't have to have the player die, because the minute that the player dies, your game's over.
Right.
Right? What you want the player to do is to continue to be scared the entire time. So
Right.
death ends your experience. Death is a fail state that takes you away from fun, that you don't necessarily need, because you can just keep being scared, right?
Right.
Like I think your fail state is when the person just throws a controller down and says, like, I've had enough of this, right? Like I'm too scared. This is okay. That's enough. I think that's where your fail is, not when the player dies.
Right. I think that's a really good point. We'll definitely look into that in our design stuff in the future. All right. We're good? One more question? All right.
This is actually just more of a comment. Something else you might want to consider for Fear Master, when you're in the environment, the player is immersed, and you have control of the lights and physical things, but you might also want to consider sounds. Like a lot of times in scary games you get the heartbeat sound, and it gets more irregular as the tension builds, and then you have that slowly rising sound. I think you're missing a lot of the tension building aspects of fear, and you just hit straight on all the jump scares. So you might want to consider some of the tension building stuff.
All right. Thank you.
All right, and our final project for the afternoon is HIT.
All right, well, thank you for that. My name is Addison Del Campo, although some people around here call me Commander Riker. You can really call me either one, I don't care. And I'm the project lead on HIT. Now, today, we're going to do a playtest. Now, HIT is a multiplayer game in which all players are given the role of an innocent. And their job is to complete objectives placed throughout the entire map. However, one of these players is secretly assigned the role of assassin. And his job is to stop those objectives and kill all of the other players. But he has to be careful. If the innocents find him and kill him, the innocents will automatically win the game. Now, I'd like to introduce my playtest team. At the head of it is my lead designer, Will. We've got Sam, the lead programmer, with the eye patch flipped up. We've got John, Bryce, and Jake. And over here in the chair, we've got Kevin, and then my lead artist, Ken. Now, Teagle, would you go ahead and take it away and explain what's going on here?
So, I'm going to join Sans server real quick. And you'll notice that we have a selection of classes from the player to choose from. And they all come with a couple of abilities. The first ability that you're going to see is going to be an always active ability. It's something that happens throughout the game regardless. So for instance, I'm going to start off being the spy. It's one of my favorite classes. And his always on ability is that you can see opponents on the map, and you can also see where the objectives are that you're trying to complete. There's the lower ability, which is something that the user has to trigger. And that, in the case of the spy, is I can become a contextual hologram disguise that allows me to be a piece of furniture or a houseplant in the game. So that's how that's going to work as far as the abilities. And each class has their own, and I'll play as a couple of classes as we go through this. One thing to note is that the assassin in the game can hench another person, making them a henchman. So if you see someone's screen over there or the projector screen go, you are now an assassin even though they were an innocent, you'll see it pop up. That means that you've become a henchman of the assassin, and the assassin can do that once per game, effectively meaning 2 assassins in the game. And the last thing is we do have communication in our game as far as wireless headsets we've been using in our prototype. But for the purposes of our gameplay today, we're going to mock that by just having open communication with each other instead of having everyone on headsets and all that communication coming through the speakers. And you'll notice when players die, we tend not to speak anymore. So that's the way that we're going to mock that up for you today. So if everyone's ready.
Oh, one final thing. At this point, this is a network game, so if anybody has a computer that's open, if you could please close it, it would make the playtest go a lot smoother, except for the people that are streaming. Obviously, you guys can keep yours open. Thank you so much for your help in that. All right. Let's go ahead and get it started.
There we go.
So you notice at the top of our screens when we load in, it tells us what we are, whether we're innocents or assassins.
And maybe it says innocent, and maybe it says assassin. We don't know. Well, I mean, we do, but nobody else does.
So our playtesters over here are making it a point not to screen watch, so we actually don't know who's who.
There's one by the pool.
Sam, putting the zone objective by the pool.
Awesome.
I have a code. Who has a code?
I have the other one. Let's meet in the pool. So, hand me that. I've got one of the innocent objectives, which is intel. So I've compiled all the pieces of intel, and I've got to take them to this cyan cylinder up here to deliver them for the innocents to complete their objective.
Oh, whoa. I just used that accountability on Jake. Jake is the assassin.
All right, guys, look for Jake.
Jake, Jake's a chair.
Jake's a chair.
Always go house plan. Who doesn't do that? Always go house plan. I knew it was chair.
All right, so as you saw on that one, the innocents won that game, and unfortunately, there is nothing more suspicious in HIT than a moving chair, which comes up a lot more than you'd think, actually, in HIT. So, Will, if you want to take it away again.
So for this one, I'm going to be the big game hunter. The thing that I always have on is that I can take twice as much damage as the other classes, and the thing that I actively use throughout the game is that I've always got this big old elephant gun. It's got unlimited ammo, but the reload time is really slow. So instead of a knife, I'll always be able to go to this gun that has a really slow reload time. So that's what the Big Game Hunter does. Ready when you guys are. There
Yeah, the face is priceless.
There's a repair goal by the pool.
There's one in the bathroom downstairs too.
Yeah, I'm gonna complete the repair goal by the pool.
I'm gonna grab the pet trash.
I'm gonna make sure he does this repair goal.
I'm gonna do it, Will.
Okay. I don't trust you.
Yeah, well, you guys should read these codes together so we can deliver.
You can see in the top left of the screen there, goals completed is 1 of 3. And when all 3 of those are completed, the innocents will have a countdown. They have to defend the goals.
Oh wait, Will just shot somebody.
No, that was Sam. I saw him do it. I told you something was off about that guy.
Okay, well, everybody be careful.
Hey Kevin, where's the intel going? You have intel?
I'm definitely sure I just saw Sam take the objective off the jet.
I was just moving it a little bit.
Someone's definitely fishy about that guy.
He's just moving it.
I see Sam. Should I shoot him?
No.
Should I shoot him?
Whoa. This is a real plan.
I have intel. Who has the other intel?
Oh, that's so wrong.
Okay, everybody knows the real plan.
Sam. Testing for fake plants.
Testing for fake plants is not as crazy as it sounds in HIT. They can come up quite often.
Who has the other intel?
I got it.
Okay, let's exchange them.
Where are you?
Here, do you have intel? Jake, want to be friends? Sam, he's behind the jet.
You shot at my Sam.
I got it. Get him? All right, someone else is alive.
Which one is Jake?
Is anyone else alive?
John's alive. Oh.
So with that playthrough, you can see how the deception and the communication comes into play. Unfortunately, crowd laughter tends to give away some of the more trickery. So for this last match, I'm going to play the debutante, and her always-on ability is that she'll never appear bloody. You saw when I was slaughtering people last time, I definitely had a telltale giveaway that I was doing some bad things. And her activated ability that I can control is that I can know for a fact whether someone is an innocent or an assassin. I just click it and it says like, hey, they're innocent or they're assassin. So that's her ability. I can do that once per round.
Which is what I did in the first game.
Right. So if everyone's ready.
Good.
It's leftover from welcome.
Quit it, Tommy.
I have the fetch objective. I'm going to take it to the jet, but I don't have a gun.
I'll protect you. I'll protect you, Will.
All right.
Okay, let me be sure. All right, you can protect me.
Yeah, Jake, you're looking a little shifty.
All right, I'll get this to a jet.
Jake, I have the other intel. Oh, Will.
What happened?
Why'd you drop that off the ledge?
Yeah, I was getting it close to the jet for you.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Jake's shooting. I'm pretty sure it's Jake.
I'm pretty sure it's you.
I'm pretty sure it's Jake. At this point, I'm positive it's Jake.
Okay.
It's another knife.
I have intel. Yeah, I have intel too. We should get together. Beware, Will. John.
That's the blow dart gun.
I'm getting shot. I'm dying. Will just kill me. Will just kill me. I'm dying.
No, it definitely wasn't me. I think I saw John.
Guys, you can bring him back.
No, I'm gonna heal him real quick. Hang on.
Are you?
Bryce, bring up the light.
Bryce, that's good.
Bryce, bring that.
Okay,
So my character is dying.
You got the intel? Jake?
Yeah.
Where you at?
My character has died, but I'm gonna still try and follow the action on the projector for you guys.
Whoa, who's this? Bryce brought me back to life, but you sounded awfully unhappy about me coming back. So
No, I love it.
I'm gonna accuse John. It's John.
No, it's not. I have intel.
I just you took it off of my dead body. Who's the debutante over there by the big game hunter? Kill him.
That's Jake.
Kill him, Jake.
He's
He's not innocent.
Okay, I'm guessing it's you then. Okay. Double damage. Let's go.
Kill these guys.
Okay, well, I guess Sam was Or maybe Kevin. Kevin, are you innocent?
Yes.
That sounds too convincing at all.
So the innocents have completed all of their objectives, and a countdown timer's been triggered. That's the the green numbers that you see in the middle of the screen. Once that finishes, the innocents will have won.
Hey,
Only two people are left at this point. and it's over. All right, and that's the hit team playtesting the game for you. They did a wonderful job. Thank you, gentlemen. All right. So what you saw there was, of course, the gameplay demo inside of Unity working, and gives you an idea of how it plays. Now, last Friday we conducted a public play test, and we wanted to document some of the highs and the lows. We recorded the reactions that players had, and I'll take this moment to apologize to anybody. Hello, internet viewers. Unfortunately, people on the internet won't be able to watch this, as we gave our playtesters our word that they would not be broadcast over the internet. We will be killing focusing it on me, so the people on the internet can stare at me, and we're going to be cutting out the audio as well. So if we're good there, we'll launch right into it. sort of the highs and the lows of our first public playtest. And now we'll move into a presentation. So here we go. Look at that, technology working well. All right. Okay, so that playtest provided us with a lot of incredibly valuable data. What it showed us was how much players were laughing, how much they were smiling, how often they were engaged in the game, and also what frustrated them, what didn't they like, what confused them. This was all very valuable data for us, and it's going to inform our design decisions beyond green slice. But another important piece of data are actually playtest metrics that allow us to figure out how the player plays the game. These also inform our decisions. And we've had a lot of fun, actually, going over all of this data and trying to understand what exactly it means for the future of HIT. And if there's one lesson, and there are many that it's taught us, the biggest lesson is that there is an unbearably large amount of value in playtesting. It is informing our design decisions right now, and it will inform them as we continue beyond green slice. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I'll cover this statistic and show you what exactly I'm talking about. This shows our classes chosen. As you can see, the spy is the overwhelming popular choice. And as you could plainly see with how often he can change into a tree or a cabinet, people like to see a cabinet drift down a hallway and assume nothing is wrong. There is something inherently enjoyable about that. And so the spy was chosen by most people. Now we looked at that and we thought, well, maybe the spy is overpowered. But then we thought, well, maybe it's not that he's necessarily overpowered. Maybe it's just that he's the most fun right now. But if you look at other three classes, they're chosen a lot less often. So beyond green slice, we want to make sure that all of our classes are equally as fun as the spy is right now. And that means looking at their abilities, retooling their abilities, and refocusing their classes in general. Now, another really important metric for us is actually to look at session and match length. Now, over the course of that playtest, we had 26 games played by 20 different playtesters. Now, after some amount of time, we told the playtesters that they were free to go, but that we really valued their insight, and we really valued their time, and we were really appreciative. Now, interestingly, most of the players stayed for 45 minutes after that, and some even stayed for an hour and 15 minutes. Now, over the course of that entire time, the average length of matches proved to be 2 minutes and 50 seconds. However, the most intense and enjoyable matches tended to be between 4 and 6 minutes. And we think that's we think that's the perfect target to shoot for beyond green slice, making sure that the majority of our matches end up in that sweet spot of between 4 and 6 minutes to ensure we can maximize on the enjoyment out of HIT. Now, one last thing I want to talk about, or one of the last things I want to talk about, is the state of what you saw just now, sort of a nutshell summary of the game. So HIT is about building, as you saw, an atmosphere of paranoia and deception. Lying is just a core mechanic, just as important as the ones on the screen. It builds this atmosphere of paranoia and deception by allowing 8 players to choose from 4 classes. And here are the one-page design documents for those 4 classes. At the beginning of the game, you're given a role of innocent or assassin. And as I told you, the innocent's complete objectives are kill the assassin, and the assassin stops the objectives or kills the innocents. Now, that's good for knowing what the state of the Unity prototype is right now. But what's really valuable for us moving forward, especially beyond green slice, is what the future of HIT is going to hold. So what you saw right now was a single round game system. That is, one round ends, or begin, and it ends, and another one begins and it ends. Nothing changes. It's the exact same. We want to explore a multi-round gameplay system where we can explore a persistent currency system. With that currency system, we'll be able to reward and punish players for certain behaviors that we particularly dislike. One of the largest of those is innocents killing innocents. We're hoping that this will actually raise the stakes of the matches and create this arc of gameplay. That means that the more you play, the more of this resource you have, and the more interesting you can make the games. So the more you play, the more chaotic it gets, the more fun you have. Another sort of side piece that we want to explore is we want to enhance that sense of paranoia, enhance that sense of communication and the necessity of it. As you saw, again, communicating in HIT is one of the most important gameplay mechanics that we actually have at our disposal, and we want to enhance that and capitalize on it. Now, Kim, if you could come over here, please. I'm going to introduce now, as I told you before, Kim. Kim is my art lead, and she's going to be showing you some concept art, some character art, and then she's going to be showing you our visual target. Yeah, go ahead.
So you saw how fun and zany and action-packed the gameplay was, and we really wanted to capture that in the look of HIT. So that's why we're going with a more stylized, cartoony feel. We're trying to go for something that's extremely stylish, really lavish, and so that kind of thing is reflected in our aquarium floor. You kind of saw that in the prototype where there was like kind of clear glass. And we actually built this out in UDK that you'll see later. We also have a lava layer idea. So this is just an idea for a future level, but it kind of shows our direction with what we want HIT to be. So we want it to be super exotic, really fanciful, and really playing off those tropes of those like spy movies, like The Incredibles. So now onto characters. We have the big game hunter. Is seen in real life and in our awesome concept art. So we're playing with like really bold shapes and really characters with a lot of personality. So he has the big mustache and the huge gun. You saw the debutante, so she's got a lot going on.
That's true.
The doctor, you know, big hair, a lot of personality. And the spy, everybody's favorite, with the eye patch, represent. And then finally we have our actual level that I spoke of.
Oh, the animation videos.
Oh, wait, we have animations. Darn it.
You're just gonna start the slideshow? There you go.
So you actually have these characters also moving. So here we have the big game hunter kind of scratching his belly. And the debutante with all the things that she has going on.
There are a lot of things going on. A lot. Now on the level.
Okay, now the level. So we started outside. You see it's like a swanky bachelor pad, super modern. So we're going for a lot of angular looks, kind of like a very cartoony feel with the sofa. Here's the big game hunter, kind of bartending. Not really, he's being lazy. Our awesome lava shader that Mark did, super cool. Of course, the aquarium floor. You can see kind of fish swimming, hammerhead shark. And as just for fun, we add a lot of little homages to the other games. So here's the Neon Knight Riders magazine.
Her animation is great.
We have a little strawberry up here for rotten fruit. Then around the corner, there is focal lay and some old concept art that we're doing.
That stands for Villains Quarterly, by the way.
So this is pretty much what we would like the visual target of HIT to be, kind of fleshed out in UDK. And we are using UDK for our engine going on after Green Slice. So ideally, this would be the kind of fleshed out look that we would have if we move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much. Before I go straight into questions, two things. One, I can leave her up for you to look at it if you'd like. I mean, if it's moving like that, I can't say I'd blame you. Two, I'd also like to thank my team. I've worked with a lot of people at FIEA, and I've worked with a lot of people in my entire life. And I swear, I don't think I've ever worked with a more dedicated group of people than the ones I have here. And I'm very appreciative of what they did, and I just like to give them a round of applause for everything they've done. Now I will take questions from the audience. I can leave her up. It's distracting. All right, I'll take questions from the audience now. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm assuming you've played Trouble in Terrorist Town.
I have not personally played it,
but you've
no,
heard
but
of
we're aware of it, yes.
You're aware of it.
We are acutely aware of it.
And things like, Clue and Halo, perhaps. So what gameplay mechanics are you really going to be using that differentiate yourself from the other games that are similar to this one?
Well, I would say that on screen, one of the biggest things that we have differentiating us from them is it's similar to like an MVP mode that you would experience in Halo. Only the difference here is you don't know who the MVP is. And he has a objective that is completely opposite the rest of the players in the game.
Addison, I can speak to that as well.
Sure, that's my lead designer, by the way.
So you look at games like Trouble in Terrorist Town, and what they do is they kind of give you a cast cast of leads, where you've got these people who are either sheriffs or assassins, and then everyone else is just kind of plebeians milling around going, hey, I hope I know who's who. But in our game, we kind of want to empower each character to have their own class and abilities and possibly some more stuff in the pipeline where everyone's more on kind of an equal footing, and the whole, like, it could be anyone is really played into it more. As well as that paranoia and communication. Whereas in the other games, it's like, well, it could be any of these people. What do you plebeians think? In our game, it's like, it could be the guy right next to you. So that's one of our main differentiators.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you for the question. Another question? Yes, sir.
I don't necessarily think it's a problem, but I'm really curious. Does your game break when people don't communicate?
It is a little bit different. We've been playing around with our communication styles as far as should we have text chat, should we have audio chat, and how do people play in dead silence. We've done a bunch of those play tests. Unfortunately, that's something that playtesting will tell us down the line. We really only had our first public play test just last week. We're still kind of dealing with the consequences from that and adjusting to it. And that's definitely something that we would like to answer in the future. What happens when we go dead silence? What happens when we have all of our communication in text? So we might do some A/B testing with that just to see what happens with gameplay.
So if I could add on to that, there was a period of time, a few days when we were sorting out sort of our voice chat options and that kind of thing, where we did experiment with straight silent gameplay. And just to see, is it something we need to prototype, the voice chat? And what we determined from the silent playtest was the game was a lot more tense in a good way, even than just the open conversation. It's less sort of uproarious. But it was more tense, like you only know what you have seen. And so I don't think it breaks the game, which is why, like, going forward, something we're interested in is the sort of proximity-based voice chat.
Absolutely.
So like mixing the two ideas of like not just everyone talking at once, so you have a limited amount of info, but you can still talk openly with who's around you.
It reminded me in a good way of Spy Party, even though Spy Party's not out yet. Rather similar.
I haven't heard of it.
I thought the presentation was great. I think. But I'm really curious as to what happens if you pull the plug, because I don't necessarily play on Xbox Live with headsets on for obvious reasons. So, I think that's something you should definitely prototype and tune against. And if you can make the game fun silent, it'll be even more fun when people are communicating.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the insight. Another question? Yes, sir.
So your game literally had me cracking up and making me want to play it, which is awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You touched on this a little bit in your presentation. I feel like this game may be able to be completely broken if you have like someone who just decides to be an axe and start shooting everybody.
Yes.
What's a little bit more details on your thoughts of how to like prevent that from happening?
Well, I know Teagle has specific thoughts on that, but I'll preface those thoughts by saying that we refer to that internally as Ramboing. Yes, we've tried to do it on a number of occasions, and what the biggest cause of it is, of course, innocent on innocent violence. And Teagle has some specific thoughts on that.
So when we deal with Ramboing, the biggest factor, like the number one to answer your question, thing that keeps someone from Ramboing through a map of 7 other people is that as soon as you take action, you have clues that you've killed someone with the blood on your character, and you're visible in a space to the other people who witness you do it, and then all of a sudden you are questioned, why did you just kill that person? And if you noticed, we had some kind of visual markers of where the sound of gunshots are coming from with our characters. So by Ramboing a map, you draw attention to yourself, and that right now is our biggest thing that says don't do that. And a lot of times we try and test it like, hey, whoever the assassin is, go ahead and Rambo everyone. And within a couple seconds, we're all communicating like, oh, Jake is going crazy, guys, shoot Jake. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But of course, through testing, we'd like to see with our different testers' play styles, we're going to run across some Rambos, and we'll have to take a look at that closer. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Oh, there we go.
I was wondering, like, in the environment you had just like bushes lying around. Are those kind of randomly spawned? I was thinking.
No, those are intentionally by myself actually. Those are intentionally placed. I wanted to try and put areas of like pods of trees and pods of chairs to try and give the assassins some place to hide.
I was just wondering, like, in terms of the spy's ability to turn into like a bush. Players might memorize locations of where bushes are.
That's true.
Yeah, we've talked about that, and that being something we'd like to go forward with is if they were randomly distributed so that, yeah, when you started the game, it's like, I really have no idea if that is a fake tree or not. Although, as much as I know the map, like, legitimately, when I was playing, I shot a tree that I did not. It looked out of place to me. It's that kind of paranoia. But absolutely, like, that, I think you're right. People play the game enough, and you'll know exactly where they are. We had a previous level before we sort of redesigned the level for gameplay and stuff, and in that one, it was much less useful. I don't know if we're just less familiar with this one now, but we got so familiar with that one that we did know where the trees and everything were. And so it's always been a plan that we'll look into that post-greenlight.
Thank you.
So on that note, if you were to randomize trees, you'd essentially be buffing the spy, which is already overpowered for the most fun. So just as a kind of opposite to what they're saying there, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe
Absolutely. Yeah, and absolutely. That's a great insight. And that's one of those things that's going to be informed through playtesting and iteration. You know, we don't want to end up making the spy, you know, way too powerful. Ideally, we want it to be level. Yes, sir.
Are there any plans to do anything dynamic with the environment, such as have the environment affect the players in some way other than just breaking the glass and opening up the pathways?
What you're referring to are what we refer to as environmental hazards. And we actually are looking into those. And we play tested a rough prototype version of one of those hazards, although we were not 100% comfortable with it just yet to make any promises. But yes, we are absolutely looking into environmental hazards. Sure.
Last question.
Okay. This is the last question, I'm sorry to say.
I can take two.
I can take two? Okay, then you'll go next.
Before you went into the presentation, I was a little concerned that everyone would just be Kate Archer in your 60s setting. But then you got to the point where you're demonstrating that, yes, there's a value to the differing silhouettes. But then another point came up, well, at least in my mind, where, like, Jake's the assassin, or Mark, or whoever's name, and what if you have multiple people of the same class, and they have the same silhouette, they might have the same color? Are you thinking about, like, palette swap so that if you don't pick up on, like, the text above their heads, whether or not that's there, or you eliminate that there's another identifying thing, like I can't read the names, or I'm too crazy right now to think about what's the right name to say. That's the guy you should look for. Look for the pink hunter or something.
Yeah, that's a great concern. It's one that we have not looked into just yet, but it's certainly one that we'll have to look into beyond Green Slice. So thank you. And last question, really last question.
So kind of what you were looking at when you were looking at the classes and how often we played and whatnot. I also saw your graph on the weapons that are used most, and by far the shotgun was the one used most, and the second one was the elephant gun to get started. Start the game with if you're the hunter. Is there anything you're doing to adjust that, or do you like that the shotgun is being used that much?
We do not necessarily like that. One of the complaints that we got through the playtest was that aiming was tricky. The shotgun is a scatter weapon. As a result of that, it's pretty simple to aim. We've addressed aiming. You saw aiming working well here. We've added in an auto aim and an aim assist option in for the player to use. We think that's why, but we're also very cautious to make sure we don't say that, well, of course that's the only reason. The shotgun may actually be more powerful than the other weapons. So at this point, that's the value of playtesting, is that it revealed that to us, and even internally, we hadn't realized the shotgun was that much easier to use. So yeah, it's not about shotguns, not yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So faculty is going to meet in MI6, so we're going to do